If you're not going to work, then get out. I'm tired of supporting a woman like you. When my husband, Henry, said this, something inside me snapped. Why should I put up with someone like him? A man who looks down on others just to feel better about himself? I don't need a man like that in my life. My name is Louise, and I'm 36 years old. I work from home as a freelance illustrator. I've always loved drawing, so I went to art school and later worked for a design company. When I turned 30, I finally took the leap and started my own business. Back then, I was single and focused on doing what I loved, but then I met Henry through a friend. We got along well, fell in love, and got married a year later. Henry worked for a company that had offices all over the world, so he traveled a lot. Because of his demanding job, he wanted me to be a full-time housewife. I agreed and stopped working as an illustrator after we got married. Since Henry was always busy, I understood that someone had to take care of the home. I believed that marriage was about supporting each other, so I had no complaints. I thought I could still practice my art and return to work when the time was right. I loved Henry, and I believed he loved me too. We trusted each other, and life was good. But things changed when Henry got promoted. He was given a new position as the general manager of a sales office, which meant we had to settle in a new city. We had moved often because of his job, so we were both happy to finally stay in one place. For the first time in a long while, I started thinking about my own future. Maybe I could work again. But reality was different. Henry was busy with his new role, and we soon realized that our rent was higher than expected. His salary was enough for us to survive, but we were struggling. Since his company didn't cover rent, we had to use our savings. I wanted to save money for the future, but at this rate, we wouldn't have any savings left. So, I asked Henry if I could start working again. I assured him I would still manage the house, but his response surprised me. I'll allow it, but you still have to take care of everything at home. His words felt wrong, but I brushed it off. I had supported him all this time, and maybe he was just feeling anxious about our new life. I was excited to work again. But soon, Henry started acting differently. What is this? He asked one night at dinner. It's pork chops with mashed potatoes and vegetables, I said. This is garbage. You're home all day, and this is the best you can do? Henry had never spoken to me like that before. I won't get any energy from this kind of food, he continued. I tried to explain. I bought carrots, Brussels sprouts, and potatoes because they were on sale. And you like pork chops, don't you? Henry's face turned red. Are you saying my salary isn't enough? He shouted. I shrank back, shocked. That's not what I meant at all. Do you know how hard I work for you? I just got promoted, and you dare to complain? I wanted to defend myself, but stopped. Henry was under a lot of stress. He was responsible for his team at work and providing for us. So instead of arguing, I said, I'm sorry. Maybe he was just exhausted. And so, I convinced myself to let it go. But Henry's bad attitude didn't stop. Hey, you're not cleaning the bathroom properly. Where's the shirt I was supposed to wear today? You'd better brush my shoes. Henry had never been like this before we moved. What was wrong with him? Every day, he yelled at me. I started doubting the man I had married. Balancing housework and my job was harder than I expected. If I focused on housework, I had no time to work. If I focused on work, I couldn't keep up with house chores. One day, I asked, now that I'm working, could you help with some house chores? Henry scoffed. You're ignoring the house because of your stupid job. Just quit it already. You work from home, so don't act like you're important. It's not like you make much money. You're just a housewife, but you think you're better than me. His shouting became a daily thing. To Henry, I was nothing more than a housewife, no matter how much I worked. How selfish. I didn't earn much, but that was because Henry kept making it harder for me. I was fed up, so I did only the bare minimum of housework and focused on my work instead. But that made Henry even angrier. The gap between us grew bigger and bigger. Then, one day, while cleaning, I found his payslip. Ugh, he's so careless, just leaving this around. I picked it up out of curiosity. I already knew his salary, but I had never seen his actual payslips before. What I saw shocked me. His salary was only half of what he had told me. What's going on? Just then, my phone rang. It was Henry's uncle, Jack. Louise, it's been a while. Oh, Jack, what's wrong? I hate to bring this up, but I've been lending Henry money. It's been a long time, And I was wondering when he's going to pay me back. Since I lent him the money, I've been worried that he won't pay me back. What? He owes you money? Everything suddenly made sense. Henry had borrowed money from Jack to cover up the missing part of his salary. He had lied to me. The amount he borrowed? Around $10,000. I apologized to Jack and promised to pay him back. Even though Henry had done something so awful, Jack didn't blame me. He just said gently, "As long as he pays me back, it's fine." That night, I had enough. I didn't confront Henry about his debt or the payslip, but my anger kept building. He had looked down on me, forced me to do all the housework, and even got in the way of my job. Yet, he still acted like I was the problem. When will you learn to do proper housework? The food is terrible, the living room is dirty. What have you been doing all day? Playing around with your silly job? Being a housewife is so easy. I finally snapped. Do you even hear yourself? I cook, I clean, just as much as you. If you don't like it, do it yourself. You come home early enough now, so why don't you help? Henry slammed the desk. Since when did you get so bossy? Don't get carried away. Who do you think supports you? I shot back. What's so bossy about asking for help? I'm doing my part, what about you? I glared at him. I didn't have to put up with this anymore. Henry didn't back down. You don't even do your job right. All you do is pretend to work. Why don't you earn some real money first? I clenched my fists. That should have been my line. Then Henry smirked. I should never have married you. You're draining all my money. If you think we don't have enough, then go earn it. If you won't, then get out. I'm sick of supporting a woman like you. He looked at me, satisfied, like he had won. He probably thought I'd cry and apologize. But instead, I said, "Fine, I understand. I'll leave." I grabbed the suitcase I had already packed. Henry scoffed. You can't do anything on your own. What makes you think you can? I looked at him coldly. Oh, and I'll leave this too. I've already filled out my part. I slammed the divorce papers on the table. His face froze in shock. Well, that's that. Fill them out and submit them ASAP, okay? I turned and walked out. I had already told my parents everything, and they welcomed me with open arms. When they heard about Henry's behavior, his debt, and his lies, they told me to divorce him immediately. I had no doubts. I wanted out. But would Henry even sign the papers? My father reassured me, if he refuses, I'll help you get a lawyer. A week later, Henry showed up at my parents' house. Did you sign the divorce papers? I asked. Henry hesitated. I'm sorry, I'm only asking if you signed them or not. Henry's face crumbled. Please don't divorce me, he begged at the front door. I was perplexed by Henry's sudden change in attitude. For someone so arrogant, his shift was unexpected. My parents looked at him suspiciously, but I decided to hear him out and invited him inside. Actually, I wasn't even promoted at work. Henry's so-called promotion had been a lie. The truth? He had been demoted and transferred to a branch office, which explained his lower salary. Henry had never been particularly skilled at his job. I had noticed his incompetence before, but I never imagined it had been bad enough to get him shuffled from one department to another. Now, he was stuck in a small, dead-end position with no hope of moving up. Too proud to admit the truth, he had faked his success. After losing his status at work, he started belittling me to boost his own ego. I thought I was a great husband just because I was supporting you as a housewife. So that was it. Henry had disrupted my work and treated me horribly just to maintain his fragile pride. I understand everything now that you're gone. You were actually making a lot of money, huh? Before I left, I had deliberately left a copy of my bank book in Henry's room. My income wasn't as high as it used to be, but it was still enough to cover expenses. I finally realized that I need you. I can't pay the rent alone, but if we work together, we can make it work. Let's start over. I want to be with you. I won't ever treat you that way again. Henry had tears in his eyes, but I felt nothing for him anymore. If you can't afford the rent, why not just move somewhere cheaper? And what about your debt? Don't you need to pay Jack back? Henry's expression shifted. How do you know about that? Even after all this, he was still hiding things from me. I shook my head. If you truly wanted a fresh start, don't you think I had the right to know about your debt? My father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. You're too dishonest, Henry. I can't trust my daughter to you anymore. Henry didn't argue. He knew he had nothing left to say. If you refuse to sign the divorce papers, I'll get a lawyer involved, I warned. Your verbal abuse, everything you said to me, is enough evidence for a divorce, and I have proof, so be prepared. Henry let out a defeated sigh and reached into his bag. Slowly, he pulled out the divorce papers. I really can't take this back, huh? It's too late, we're strangers now. I took the papers from him. Now, I'm focused on my career as an illustrator. I never imagined that leaving Henry would change my life so drastically, but I have no regrets. You only live once, so it's better to live happily, on your own terms.
Kevin's the one who owns this house, and he's your dad's actual son. Wait, what? The day after the funeral of my cancer-stricken dad, my sister-in-law Tiffany, along with my brother, came to visit our family home and began scolding my mom and me vigorously. Tiffany, this is our house, isn't it? It's absurd to tell us to leave. When my mom said this, Tiffany glared at us. No. Can you please stop acting as if it's your own house? Look, Ashley. Don't just stand there dazed, hurry up and start packing to move. I looked at my brother for help, and he hung his head and muttered softly. That might be true. See? Even Kevin agrees, so hurry up and leave. Your dad is no longer here. Furious as if Tiffany had been waiting for my dad's death, I clenched my fists, ready to unleash all my feelings at her, right at that moment. My name is Ashley. I was raised by a single mom before I even started elementary school. The only relative I remember having was my mom. We had no one else to rely on. So my mom worked from morning till night, and I was left to fend for myself at home. Even as a child, I understood our financial hardships. We lived in a crumbling apartment with shared bath and toilet facilities at one point. Yet, my mom always kept smiling and took good care of me. Seeing her like that, I couldn't bring myself to say I was lonely or sad. I did my best not to trouble her. I tried not to be selfish, and at school, I kept my grades up and behaved quietly. It was honestly hard not to express myself, but I endured for my mom's sake. When I was in middle school, my mom mentioned she was thinking about marrying another guy. Ashley, I'm thinking of marrying Dylan. I want to know how you feel. So please talk to me honestly. I knew that my mom had been dating Dylan for a few years. I had met him a few times, as he took me to amusement parks. Ashley, you don't have to call me Dad, I won't force you. But I really do care about you just like your mom does. Thank you. Understanding that Dylan was a good man, I was all for their remarriage. Most of all, I was happy to see my mom smiling more. And there was no way I could oppose it. Dylan cherished me greatly, and being a business owner, he promised to support us financially. It was a relief to think that my mom wouldn't have to work tirelessly anymore. Ashley, I think I've mentioned this before, but Dylan has a son. He's 7 years older than you. He's a very reliable older brother. His name is Kevin. Nice to meet you. I had heard about him, but meeting him only after living together. My new brother seemed as kind as Dylan. Having been lonely as an only child, I was happy to have a brother. However, my brother thought differently. The moment they find out Dad's a business owner, people change their tune. You're just one of them. That's not true. I just want Mom to be happy. You think your mom's after his money, don't you? Well, Dad will realize it soon enough, so I won't say anything. While he was smiling and talking to our parents, he showed his true colors when it was just the two of us, constantly making sarcastic remarks to me, but fortunately, he never said anything to my mom. I endured it alone, thinking that it would lead to a harmonious family life. Years went by, and after 4 years, my brother began to lose interest in making snide remarks, and didn't pay much attention to me anymore. I also kept a moderate distance from my brother. Kevin, congratulations on graduating from university. Good luck living on your own. Yeah, I'll come home every now and then. Having graduated from university, my brother started working at Dylan's company. Although the family home was within commuting distance, he began living on his own. My mom, treating him like her own child, was happy and supportive. A few years after my brother moved out of our family home, I was working as a professional. By then, I had started calling Dylan Dad, and was very close to him, not feeling at all like he was my stepdad. One day, my brother contacted me saying he had something important to discuss, and asked us to be home on Saturday. We waited anxiously. This is Tiffany, whom I'm dating. We're thinking of getting married. Nice to meet you, I'm Tiffany. I met Kevin while working as a receptionist at your dad's company. We're already living together. Tiffany seemed childish for her age, which is the same as mine. 28, yet she was as beautiful as one would expect a receptionist to be. Aware of her beauty, she exhibited a confident attitude that made her a bit difficult to interact with. However, since she worked at my dad's company, she must be competent at her job. Tiffany and Kevin, I'm so happy for you two on your marriage. We need to celebrate. Thank you so much, Dad. Congratulations. Of course, my parents and I congratulated the two, and the greetings concluded smoothly. However, from then on, whenever I met Tiffany, she would make sarcastic remarks. Ashley, was it? Getting too carried away with Kevin's dad because he likes you, huh? Well, I'm superior, and soon I'll be the favored one. That's not true. I'm not getting carried away. That attitude of yours is so annoying. Hey, could you not attend our wedding? I don't want people to think such an ugly person is part of the family. Tiffany clearly disliked me. She never made such remarks in public or in front of my parents or brother, but did so when we were alone. She smiled and treated me like a dear sister in front of everyone, so nobody would suspect that Tiffany was being sarcastic towards me in private. If you really want to be part of our wedding, a nice gift is a must. And dress plainly so you don't stand out. Okay, I understand. Just listen to me, and I won't give you a hard time. Not wanting to worsen my relationship with my brother, I complied with all of Tiffany's demands. I attended their wedding quietly, as Tiffany had instructed. Several months after my brother's wedding, unfortunately, cancer was discovered in my dad, and he had to undergo treatment. When the cancer was detected, he was already given only a few months to live. My mom became despondent and increasingly unstable mentally. It can't be true that Dad has cancer, the doctors are lying. He was even at work just yesterday. Mom. Dad has been hospitalized since yesterday. Remember, we went to visit him together? He's not ill at all. Why would he be hospitalized? As my dad battled cancer, I also had to support my mom's psychiatric visits and emotional care, which drained me both mentally and physically. My brother was swamped with handling the company instead of our dad, and wasn't available to chat. So, I approached Tiffany to see if she could help out. Tiffany, I know you're busy, but could you help with Mom's hospital visits or the laundry for the hospital? Why should I do such dirty jobs? I'm not even related by blood. Why should I have to do them? Even just for a day would help. I've used up all my leave and can't take any more off. Maybe you could accompany her to the hospital every Monday. The company will be fine without someone useless like you. If you're so useless, at least do the dirty work properly. Tiffany was abusive not just towards me, but also towards my parents. I wanted to discuss this with my brother, but seeing him swamped with work made me reluctant to bother him. I took on everything myself and kept my thoughts about Tiffany to myself. During this time, despite the treatment, my dad passed away. Just before he died, we were called by his doctor to come to the hospital to be with him in his final moments. However, Tiffany didn't show up at my dad's side even an hour after. She said she was finishing shopping. My dad, realizing he didn't have much time, started to speak in a faint voice. Just then, Tiffany entered the hospital room with a cheerfulness that seemed out of place. I'm late. How are you doing, Dad? I was about to reprimand her when my dad stopped me and took a breath before he began to speak. Kevin. After I'm gone, I'm worried about Mom and Ashley. Could you live with them? I understand. Don't worry, it'll be okay. After hearing my brother's response, my dad quietly passed away. As silence enveloped the room, my mom began to cry, collapsing in grief. I embraced my sobbing mom's shoulders, and then I caught sight of Tiffany smirking. The day after my dad's funeral, in accordance with his will, the couple came to the family home. Kevin, thank you so much for coming. Dad would be pleased. Come in. Mom, you don't need to worry about anything. They welcomed the couple inside. Then, Tiffany suddenly started shouting. Kevin's the one who owns this house, and he's your dad's actual son. You outsiders don't belong here. Get out. Wait, what? Tiffany, this is our house, isn't it? It's absurd to tell us to leave. When my mom said this, Tiffany glared at us. No, no. Can you please stop acting as if it's your own house? Look, Ashley. Don't just stand there dazed, hurry up and start packing to move. Desperately seeking help, I looked at my brother, who hung his head and muttered softly. That might be true. See? Even Kevin says so, so hurry up and leave. Your dad-in-law is no longer here. Furious as if Tiffany had been waiting for my dad's death, I clenched my fists, ready to unleash all my feelings at her, right at that moment. Outsiders like you better leave quickly, Tiffany. Huh? Kevin spoke in a low voice to Tiffany. Then, she began to speak, choking on her words. What are you talking about, Kevin? You've got it all wrong. No, I'm not wrong. I was speaking to you, Tiffany. Angered by Kevin's unexpected response, Tiffany directed her rage towards me. Ashley. You must have seduced Kevin, right? Planning to take all of Father's and Kevin's inheritance for yourself. There's no way Ashley would seduce me. She's always been awkward and keeps to herself. She couldn't possibly do that. Tiffany, who began to blame me, was met with fierce anger from Kevin. who then started recounting the past. I wasn't thrilled about Dad getting married again. I would always say Ashley was just after his money. But I got nervous that Mom would rat me out to Dad, and I'd catch a lecture. Honestly, I also thought it would be easier if I told my mom about Kevin's behavior. However, seeing my parents happy together, I couldn't bring myself to snitch. And I wanted them to understand that I wasn't after the money, so I endured. Despite that, Ashley never snitched on me. Even Mom showered both me and Ashley with equal love. Ashley just kept enduring my treatment. That's why I stopped blaming her. That's because she's obviously after the money. No. Even now, Ashley has taken on the care of our parents by herself, never complaining and even taking care of Dad, who isn't blood related. That's because it was for the money. You didn't take care of anyone, did you? You shouldn't be blaming Ashley. At my brother's words, Tiffany paled and began to panic at his accusation. Kevin, you're just being deceived by Ashley. It's ridiculous to side with them. Shut up. You just want my money, don't you? No, that's not true. Then how do you explain the splurging with my card right after Dad died? That is, according to my brother. Tiffany claimed it was for their new life and used his card to splurge. The items she bought weren't furniture but accessories and brand name clothes for herself. You thought I would inherit everything, but I only inherited the company. And Ashley inherited everything else, including the house. There's no money coming your way. No, that's not true. What my brother is saying is true. He willingly chose to only take over the company. And he left the house for me and Mom so we could live there. It was when we were surrounding our dad, who had little time left, at the hospital before Tiffany arrived. My dad, his consciousness fading, spoke about the inheritance. Kevin, can I leave the company to you? Of course, I might not do as well as Dad, but leave it to me. In return, Dad, I want to leave the house and assets to Ashley. I want to ensure Mom and Ashley don't face any hardships. You were thinking that far ahead for Ashley and the others. Thank you. I was surprised that my not-so-close brother had thought so much about us. I also remember feeling happy. Unaware of this fact, Tiffany's attempt to snatch the inheritance just made me sigh. Tiffany, it's obvious to everyone what you're up to. You, as a daughter-in-law, really have no business getting involved in the inheritance issue. Hearing my words, Tiffany lunged at me with a demonic expression. How dare you? Her grip was surprisingly strong, and I couldn't shake her off. Then, my brother grabbed her hand and freed my neck. Stop it, Tiffany. Enough is enough. But it's Ashley who's at fault. While being restrained by my brother, Tiffany flailed her arms and continued to resist. Still, my brother sighed and then told her, Tiffany, let's get a divorce. Wha? No, that's not true. When my brother confronted Tiffany with divorce, she suddenly became subdued. As my brother let go of her, she collapsed to the ground, losing her support. Several months later, my brother's divorce was finalized. According to him, he decided not to ask for compensation in exchange for Tiffany returning the money she had spent. However, rumors of her misusing my brother's money spread throughout the company, making it awkward for Tiffany, who then felt compelled to resign voluntarily. Even without a job, chased by debt repayments, Tiffany searched for new employment, while working multiple part-time jobs from dawn till dusk. Meanwhile, I started living in the house my dad left us. together with my mom and brother. The business my brother inherited from our dad is also doing well. My mom has come to terms with my dad's death and is gradually recovering. Every year, we visit my dad's grave together. Dad, we all came together today. By the way, Dad, Ashley has found someone nice. He's a bit unreliable, though. Hey. Come on. Sorry. But he really cares about Ashley. Yeah. Dad, please keep watching over us. At my dad's grave, I clasp my hands together and report that today. Just like every day, we're supporting one another as a family. Outsiders don't need to come to the funeral. On the night of the wake for the kind father-in-law who had passed away, my mother-in-law who had left all the responsibility of caring for him to my husband and me, said this. What? Since it's a family ceremony, please refrain if you're not family. And besides, Dad's $3 million inheritance is ours. Surprised by Judy's words, my husband asked again. Daniel, Judy, what are you talking about? It's Dad's funeral. And $3 million. Then, with a sigh of annoyance, the mother-in-law said, the youngest like you won't get a penny. Just renounce your inheritance. That's absurd. Now is not the time to talk about inheritance. Agitated, my husband protested, and I continued in a tearful voice. Right. Please, let us say a proper goodbye to Dad. The mother-in-law glared at me. Why are you, an outsider, acting like family? Come to think of it, Dad did ask the nurse to call you at the end. Did you have something going on with Dad? Daniel and Judy were dramatically disgusted. Ew, gross. Were you eyeing Dad for his inheritance? Scott, you married a terrible woman. I clenched my fists, enraged by their cruel treatment of my husband and kind father-in-law, and finally suspected of infidelity. Such despicable people. I took a deep breath and said calmly, I understand. We won't attend the funeral. My name is Christina. I'm 35 years old. Scott and I met through a coworker, dated, and eventually got married. I work as a bank teller, and my husband works for a multinational company. Despite our busy lives, we enjoy our time together. Scott, you're bringing your dad's clothes, right? Yes, that's right. Thank you, Christina. Since we both had the day off, Scott and I went to the hospital where the father-in-law was admitted. Scott, Christina. Thank you for coming today. He noticed us and smiled as he sat up slowly. Last year, he suffered a stroke and has since been paralyzed on his right side, struggling through rehabilitation in the hospital. It's getting quite cold, so make sure to stay warm. Thank you. And you too, don't catch a cold either. The father-in-law responded to my husband, who spoke kindly to him. While listening to their exchange, I changed his clothes. Christina, Scott. I'm sorry for all this trouble I've caused. Don't worry about it, Dad. It's what we should do. Exactly, just let us know if there's anything else we can do. As we were enjoying a peaceful moment, the door to the room burst open. It was the mother-in-law, brother-in-law Daniel, and sister-in-law Judy. The mother-in-law, who stormed noisily into the hospital room, said insincerely upon noticing us, Oh. And who might this be? Scott, and, what was your name again? Seizing the opportunity, Daniel and Judy eagerly continued. Mom, that's too harsh. Even if she's just a burden of a wife. Right. It's Kristen, right? Judy snickered condescendingly. I couldn't respond, just remained silent. Even after 5 years of marriage, they had never once spoken kindly to us. Hey. Mom, Daniel, Judy. I can take it, but don't be rude to Christina. Defending me as I looked down, my husband spoke irritably. The mother-in-law sighed and shrugged her shoulders, saying, Oh, come on. Why are you so angry? It's just a joke, laugh it off. There's a limit to jokes. I've always thought. Scott began, but the mother-in-law cut him off. That doesn't matter. We're going to have a family discussion now. So you outsiders should leave. What? Family? I am family too. Scott protested, but Daniel dismissively waved him off. You're too presumptuous for the youngest who can't do anything. Just leave. Judy laughed derisively and said, Right. You're just in the way. Despite feeling crushed, my gentle husband took my hand. Let's go home, he said with a pained voice, and I squeezed his hand in return. We said bye to the father-in-law, who looked troubled, and left the room. On the way home, Scott held my hand tightly and said with a choked voice, Christina, I'm really sorry. My family keeps saying such disrespectful things. I smiled at my husband as he apologized. Don't worry about it. The one who's really hurt is you. Upon hearing my words, my husband's face crumpled as if he was about to cry. He was born the youngest of 3 siblings. While his mother doted on his older brother Daniel and sister Judy. She was indifferent to him. As a child, she never once attended any school. Events like class observations or sports days that he participated in. She would buy anything his siblings asked for, but always ignored his requests. The clothes and toys he received were hand-me-downs from his older siblings. Always worn out. From a young age, he had resigned himself to the futility of asking for anything. Furthermore, even the tuition for high school was reluctantly provided. He was constantly told, "You'll work after middle school." Despite the poor academic performance of his siblings, who were sent to private universities, his mother refused to pay any of his tuition fees. However, because he was a good student, he attempted to take out student loans. But upon learning this, his father helped out and paid for him to attend a relatively affordable state university. Thanks to this, he was able to work at the company where he is employed today. Even when we went to greet his family upon our decision to marry, his mother showed no interest in us. She never asked my name and spoke with apparent disinterest. Do as you please. With those dismissive words, she didn't even bother to offer us coffee, clearly wanting us to leave quickly. Instead, Daniel and Judy sneered down at me. To think someone would marry such a man. Really, though. She must be quite the odd one. My husband has always been treated as a nuisance and a burden by his family. Even after our marriage, nothing changed. And we were never invited to family weddings or memorial services. Relatives who didn't know any better would often ask us why we hadn't attended, blaming us. No matter how cold they were to me, Dad was always on my side. My husband murmured softly. His father, often away due to work when he was young, wasn't home much. Nevertheless, he always made sure to provide presents for events like Christmas and birthdays. His mother never did anything like that. But my husband was content. Despite his busy schedule, he would take time off work to attend his graduation, something he still happily talks about today. It was only the father-in-law who smiled and congratulated us on our marriage. He always cared about me too, always greeting me with a smile. However, even he was coldly referred to as nothing more than an ATM by his family after he fell ill, and they treated him harshly. That's why we willingly took on the task of caring for him. Scott. I will always cherish you and your father. Hearing this, my husband smiled bashfully. Gently picking up my hand, he said, "Thank you always. I'm sorry for the trouble." A few months later, we received a call from the hospital. "Your father-in-law has had another stroke." We rushed there. But by the time we arrived, the father-in-law had already passed away. Dad. I wanted to do more for you. Dad. Dad. My husband cried out loudly as he looked at his father, now peacefully at rest. The words the father-in-law had spoken to me. And his smiling face flashed through my mind. And before I knew it, I was crying with big tears. When the mother-in-law, Daniel, and Judy arrived, they showed no tears and seemed rather in good spirits. "We've arranged the funeral. You handle the troublesome parts," she said dismissively, pushing a funeral service brochure onto my husband. And then leaving promptly. We were stunned, but then realized. We have to properly send off your dad. We immediately contacted the funeral home to arrange the wake and funeral. A few days later, after the wake went smoothly and the mourners had left, I spoke to the mother-in-law, now in mourning clothes. "I want to discuss the arrangements for tomorrow's funeral." "Oh, just ask the funeral director, everything's taken care of." Then she said something unbelievable. "You outsiders don't need to come to tomorrow's funeral." Excuse me? What? My husband and I asked at the same time. Seeing our reaction, Daniel smirked and opened his mouth. "Thanks for your hard work with the caregiving. But now you're dismissed. Don't show up at the funeral tomorrow." "What are you talking about? Explain yourself." As I spoke with a trembling voice, shaken by the situation, Judy quickly interjected. "It's obvious. Did you really think you could attend? The funeral is a family ceremony. It's none of your business, you outsiders. Stay away." And the $3 million inheritance, we're taking it. Frustrated, my husband asked back. "Daniel, Judy, what are you talking about? It's Dad's funeral. This is no time for jokes." "And $3 million. The mother-in-law lazily shook her head. "Dad was a high earner, and we come from a wealthy family. So there's a lot of inheritance. Just so you know, you should renounce your inheritance. There's nothing for the youngest." "What are you saying? Who cares about inheritance right now?" Continuing after my husband, I said, trying to hold back tears. "Scott is right. Please let us say goodbye to him." But the mother-in-law glared at me sharply. What are you doing acting like family?" "Ah, that's right, at the end. Dad asked the nurse to call you, didn't he? That's because we were always the ones taking care of him." As I answered, Daniel and Judy exaggeratedly grimaced. "You were having an affair with Dad, weren't you? Disgusting. The worst. You were probably eyeing inheritance, weren't you? You were just caregiving for the money, right? Scott, you've been deceived. What are you talking about? Christina is." As my husband raised his voice in anger, the mother-in-law quickly interjected. "I don't even want to call such a despicable daughter-in-law who cheats with her husband's father, and this nuisance of a youngest son, family. Leave now and never appear before us again. Enough. Christina has been earnestly caring for Dad. How can you say such things?" I bit my lip hard. To be treated so poorly by these people. Suspected of infidelity with the kind father-in-law. I was beyond angry. Taking a deep breath, I said in a low voice, "Scott, that's enough." Glaring at the mother-in-law and others, I continued, "I understand what you all are saying. We won't attend the funeral." Hearing this, my husband replied in a calm voice, "Yeah. I don't want to consider people who mock us like this family. We'll pay respects to Dad at his grave." With that, we left the place after paying respects to the father-in-law. 2 days later, the mother-in-law called my cell phone. I told my husband. And it seemed she had called him as well. "Don't answer. Let's just ignore it." As I was hesitating about whether to answer the phone, Scott said that, so I didn't pick up at all. However, the calls from the mother-in-law were persistent and daily. A week later, when I was thinking about blocking her due to the incessant calls, the mother-in-law, along with Daniel and Judy, suddenly visited our apartment. "What do you want now?" Scott asked, arms crossed, as the restless mother-in-law started accusing us rapidly. "What do you mean by this? The inheritance from Dad, all of it yours? I wasn't told about this." Hearing this, Scott responded firmly, "Oh, that's what this is about." A lawyer came to us too, and we heard everything. It was the day after the funeral. A lawyer visited us and informed us that the father-in-law had left a will. The will stated that all his inheritance should be transferred to us. And we had already started the process to receive it. You thought you'd naturally get the inheritance because you're family, right? Normally, you'd definitely receive a mandatory portion, wouldn't you? That's right. And yet, all the inheritance is going to Scott and his. We're told we don't qualify for any of it. As the mother-in-law was panicking, her face turning bright red, and becoming agitated, Scott and I calmly stated, "Of course. My father-in-law had requested the lawyer to disinherit you, ensuring you wouldn't get the inheritance. If you're disinherited, you can't even receive the minimum reserved portion." Then Daniel leaned forward, raising his voice. "Yeah, that's it. What does disinheritance mean? I can't accept this. Daniel, I heard you were always saying horrible things like calling Dad useless and telling him to get a job when he needed care." Scott glared at attacking Daniel and spoke in a low voice. "That's not. Moreover, it seems you've been misusing Dad's bank deposits. That's reason enough for disinheritance. Why do you guys know that? Your father left a letter with the lawyer for us. It was all written there." As Daniel panicked, I calmly stated. Then Judy interjected. "But still, it's not fair for you two to take everything. I need money too." However, Scott shook his head in dismay at such a sister. "Judy, you've been heavily misusing money and have a habit of debt, right? On the day we were driven out of the hospital room, you even made Dad pay off your debts." "That's right. Forcing someone to take over your debts is also a reason for disinheritance." As Scott and I pressed on, Judy was at a loss for words. Silence fell over Daniel and Judy. Seeing this, the impatient mother-in-law shouted, "What? The nuisance youngest. Don't get cocky." Amidst the resounding insults, Scott said calmly, "Just to say, the worst one is Mom. She's been cheating for years, while Dad was on solo assignments, doing whatever she wanted." "What? That's not." Daniel and Judy, with eyes wide open, stared at the mother-in-law. I sighed and said, "Did you two not know? You underestimated kind Dad, didn't you? Dad gathered evidence beforehand and prepared everything so it would reach us and the lawyer. Scott frowned and scornfully continued looking at the mother-in-law. If a spouse has been cheating for many years, you can disinherit them. Didn't you know that? Accusing me and Dad of an affair during the wake was because you were cheating yourself, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have thought of such an idea. Under our relentless words, the mother-in-law's face twisted rapidly. Then, turning pale, she could only tremble her lips. You really thought you could do whatever you wanted and still get the inheritance? Thinking you could regret it now is too late. With anger seeping through, Scott spat those words out. And Daniel miserably clung to him. Hey, Scott. Please, I'm begging you, just give me a little bit of the inheritance. I need money because I failed at investing. There must be a lot left, right? Following Daniel, Judy collapsed to the floor as if she were about to prostrate herself. Her face, messed up from tears, she rubbed against Scott's feet, clinging to him. I'm sorry for everything that's happened. Please forgive me. If it turns out that I have debts, I'll be divorced. Scott looked down disdainfully at Daniel and Judy, displaying their disgraceful behavior. I will never forget how you treated me and Dad. Don't expect forgiveness. As he trembled with clenched fists, watching this scene, the mother-in-law furrowed her brows and raised her voice. Do you really think it's okay to abandon your family like this? You know what will happen. Hearing the pitiful cries of the mother-in-law, I inadvertently let out a what? Scott. And I looked at each other and spoke together. Family? Please don't make me laugh. Weren't you the ones who first called us outsiders? There's no way we would help outsiders like you. You're just facing the consequences of your actions. With Scott's final words, we locked out the three of them. It was a hassle to push out the three who were desperately clinging. But with the help of the building manager who heard the commotion, we managed to send them away. The expressions on the mother-in-law's face as they left were completely worn out, showing none of the spiteful features they had before. After the three left, our apartment returned to silence, and Scott slowly pulled me close as I let out a deep sigh. Soon after, we received the inheritance from the father-in-law. To avoid any further trouble from them, we moved immediately, and even put a lock on our family register. Finally, peaceful days arrived. From what relatives told me, Daniel had resorted to borrowing money from consumer finance and loan sharks to cover his failed investments. Now overwhelmed with debt, he is trembling with dread from collection calls, working at a factory and living a meager life. Judy, discovered by her husband to have a debt problem, was divorced. She returned to her parents' home without a decent job, living a life far from her previous glamorous one. She was turned away from night jobs and is barely managing her increasing debts with a part-time job. The mother-in-law's affair partner turned out to be a married man. Naturally, his wife found out and demanded a large amount of compensation. The mother-in-law, now greatly aged, could not find a new lover and lives in a shabby apartment, struggling even for daily meals. But that is no longer our concern. Meanwhile, freed from worries, Scott was promoted to department head at work. We also had a beautiful daughter, and I am spending my days as a stay-at-home mom. Remembering the kindness of the father-in-law, I pour a lot of love into our daughter. We plan to continue living these warm days with Scott and our daughter. The mother-in-law, Daniel, and Judy were selfish and despicable people. It's a miracle how Scott turned out to be such a decent person. I'm truly glad that the father-in-law was on our side. Despite their horrendous actions, like calling him useless or demanding he work while sick, making him pay debts, or cheating for years. They still thought they were entitled to the inheritance. It's just too shameless. It's good that the inheritance didn't end up in the hands of those devils, thanks to the father-in-law, who properly arranged the disinheritance. I am Hillary. I'm a 23-year-old in my first year in the workforce. I grew up in an ordinary family with my parents and two elder sisters born a year apart. However, life changed drastically when my mother passed away due to an illness during my school years. Originally carefree, my father started to drink daily and rarely came home. Moreover, despite it being shortly after my mother's death, he quickly found a new girlfriend and paid little attention to us sisters. My mother was a homemaker, so my father never helped around the house. Therefore, my sisters and I, who usually helped our mother, had to share all the household chores. And my eldest sister even quit her club activities to manage our home. My sisters and I were all close in age and got along well. Whenever I cried missing our mother, my sisters would embrace me and we encouraged each other to become respectable individuals for our mother's sake. Even after going to college, my sisters cared for me and continued to live at our family home. I think, in the absence of our mother, we all wanted to cherish our family time even more. Despite my father living as he pleased, we didn't mind that and enjoyed shopping and dining out together. However, our peaceful days were abruptly disrupted. Out of the blue, my father said he was remarrying and brought a woman home. Nice to meet you, I'm Kelly. I'm much younger than your mother was. Well, I'm going to remarry your father, but I don't intend to become your mother. So please don't call me that. That was her introduction. Kelly, the woman he intended to remarry, was only 20 years older than me. She seemed proud of her beauty, perhaps due to her attention to aesthetics. Kelly acted sweetly around my father, but showed her true colors when with us. Once, she even tried to dispose of our mother's mementos, which led to a huge fight with my sisters. I'm his wife now, why should I care about keeping his ex-wife's stuff? I'm going to throw all of this away, so hand them over. Kelly, these are our mother's mementos. They may not mean anything to you, but to us, they are irreplaceable memories. Please, don't throw them away. But your father said it's okay to throw everything away. How long will you keep dragging your mother along? I am your mother now, you should care about me. While claiming she didn't want to be our mother, Kelly only acted motherly when it suited her. Concerned about her disposing of the mementos, my sisters and I pooled our part-time job money to rent a storage unit to keep them safe. Honestly, I still wished we could live surrounded by our mother's belongings. Thus, we were forced to lead a life nervously without being able to be immersed in the memories of our mother. What complicated our feelings the most was our father squandering money on Kelly. He was an elite with a high income, which he often boasted about. Although I don't know the details, he seemed to earn hundreds of thousands annually. And Kelly, having caught wind of this, demanded unbelievably various expensive items. She constantly upgraded to the latest smartphones and accumulated luxury sports cars, clothes, and shoes from high brands. It made me want to ask if she ever used her own money. After marrying, Kelly quit her job and seemed to be dependent by nature. Moreover, while my father lavishly spent money on Kelly, he was stingy with our living expenses. Although he would give us money when asked, he would immediately add, "Can't you manage on your own?" This forced us to juggle multiple jobs to cover our expenses. And we vowed to leave this house and live freely someday. Finally, my sisters saved enough money to rent an apartment, and I moved in with them. Honestly, even my newly employed sisters didn't have much financial leeway. But we had reached our limit with my father and Kelly's actions, thinking it better to leave to preserve our memories with our mother. When it was time to move, I told Kelly since my father was away on a business trip. "Kelly, we've rented an apartment and will be moving out. Thank you for everything. Are you finally moving out? It's about time. I have been wondering what you guys are thinking. Because you and your sisters keep staying in your father's house even though he's newly married. It's embarrassing, living at home at your age. They call that grown women in children's rooms. Kelly, we're not old enough to be grown women in children's rooms. As my sisters say, we've had enough of having our mother's memories tarnished. Well, to you she was your mother, but to me, she's a stranger. By the way, is your new place just a tiny one-room studio? Living in such a cramped space with 3 women must be tough. It's too cramped. And you'll just end up fighting. Don't come back here, okay? Actually, it's not a one-room studio. We get along well and will support each other in our new life. Don't worry. I'm not worried at all. When you move out, make sure to take all your belongings. Since you 3 sisters used one room each, my room was cramped and I hated it. I'm going to use the spare room for my branded goods. So, don't come back here during holidays or any time, okay? You'll probably get married someday anyway, so it's fine, right? Why can't I come back to my own home? No matter what. Kelly, you don't have the right to decide that. We may want to come back and talk about our mother sometimes. We don't intend to interfere with you and my father's life. But we hope you can understand our feelings. No, I don't care about that. The house is getting old anyway, and I wanted to remodel it. Maybe we'll demolish it and have your father build a new mansion. Well, I'm his wife now, so don't meddle in what I do. Exasperated by Kelly's arrogance, my sisters took all our mother's mementos to their new home. We sometimes missed the home we shared with our mother. To be sure, but we could find peace of mind. In our new apartment, we filled it with pictures of our mother and celebrated her birthday with cakes and special meals. Though our father was absent, it felt as if he had never been there. And we enjoyed our time. However, shortly thereafter, I received a shocking call from Kelly. That day, after a tiring day at my new job, I came home exhausted. Suddenly, I noticed my smartphone was ringing. Kelly's name was displayed on the screen. My sisters had cut off all contact with Kelly, so I was the only one she could reach. Although I was tired and really didn't want to, I pressed the call button. And she told me something unbelievable. "Hillary, something terrible has happened. Your father was in an accident and has passed away." What? Your father had an accident? I just got a call from the police. And they said if he has children, they should come immediately, so bring your sisters. I got it. I was shaken, but so was Kelly. After ending the call, I explained the situation to my worried sisters, and we rushed to the hospital. According to what I heard, my father had an accident while on a business trip with colleagues and didn't make it back. The others were safe but hospitalized with serious injuries, unable to attend his funeral. While still in shock, my sisters and I continued to thank everyone who attended the funeral. Kelly was clearly faking her tears, exaggerating her crying. She kept saying how much she loved my father and how she wanted children. How at only 43, she was now left alone, her lies were endless. We were so stunned that we couldn't even argue back, and before we knew it, the funeral was over. With our father gone, there was no reason for us to see Kelly anymore. If she continued to live in our family home, it was a pity and it would be inevitable to let her have it, said my eldest sister. However, the day after the funeral, Kelly called us again and said something outrageous. From today, the house and all the assets are mine. You've already rented an apartment and moved out. And I have no intention of giving you a single penny of your father's inheritance. You're all grown up now, and you can live on your own salaries, right? I can't work. So I'll be taking the life insurance and inheritance as my living expenses. We were speechless at Kelly's absurd statement. But there was no way we could accept such terms. No, it was impossible. Please wait a moment. I understand that the sudden loss of our father is confusing for you, Kelly. But we feel the same way. There has been a gap between us since our mother died. But we never hated our father. Even though we moved out, this house is filled with our family memories. Regarding the inheritance and life insurance, we're not asking for a fortune, but as his daughters, we surely have a right to receive something. What? Playing the daughter card now? If you want the inheritance, just say it. But as I said just now, I have no intention of giving you a penny. What happens to this house is up to me, and I can remarry and live with someone else if I want. I still don't know how much the inheritance will be. But your father was an elite and had good insurance. Kelly, is there someone else you're seeing now? Is that true? Well, who knows? But I'm the type who's popular with men. Now that I'm a widow, men won't leave me alone. But I don't have children. And it doesn't matter to you guys if I remarry to distract myself from loneliness. We are strangers, after all. I see. I understand your thoughts, Kelly. Please do as you wish. Good, if you understand. Now get out, all of you. I'm busy because I need to talk to the insurance company. Realizing that no further words would change Kelly's mind, we decided to leave our family home without looking back. There were no more memories there. I decided with my sisters to keep all past memories in our hearts and find new happiness for ourselves. Of course, receiving the inheritance would make our lives somewhat easier, but we weren't desperately seeking money and honestly didn't want any more to do with Kelly. A week later, after the tumultuous days passed, we returned to our routine lives. Each of us went to work, worked hard all day, and at night, we cooked and discussed the day's events. That day, after dinner and enjoying cake with my sisters, Kelly called again. What could it be this time? I would have preferred to ignore such calls. But considering it might be about our Father's Month memorial, I answered. Hello? Oh, Hillary? I need help. I refuse. Don't abandon me so suddenly. Actually, the person who was with your father during the accident turned out to have been his affair partner. Besides, the woman was also married. So her husband got angry and contacted me. I said I'm unrelated as the second wife. But the affair partner was neglecting household and childcare duties for work. And the husband had been working hard at home. So, the lawyer said I should show some sincerity. In that case, why don't you show the sincerity he is asking for? Considering the husband's feelings, it's only natural. That's not all. My affair was also discovered, and the wife is demanding apologies from me. In fact, it turned out your father had been spending a lot while he was alive. And when we opened the accounts, there was hardly any savings or inheritance left. I thought I'd be able to live comfortably with the inheritance and insurance. Also, my affair partner had promised to divorce his wife and remarry me. But as soon as she scolded him, he decided to break up with me. Can you believe it? What I can't believe is that you still think you're right, Kelly. My father was at fault too. But logically, each of the affair partner's wife and husband must be deeply hurt. You really should find a way to show some sincerity. Then you and your sisters should help me. I have other debts. And I might have to sell this house. Then I'll have nowhere to live. And won't be able to maintain my current lifestyle. If that's the case, why not sell your luxury cars and designer goods and get a job? Since you've lived off other people's money for so long, you probably don't realize that the value and importance of luxury items come from purchasing them with your own money. It's absurd that after committing adultery, which deviates from moral conduct, you play the victim when the affair partner repents and returns to his wife. Also, we are strangers, and you are not our mother, Kelly. We have no obligation to help you. Hillary, I'm really sorry for everything. I've been wrong as your mother. I've taken the long way around, but I'll try to become a good mother now. So please help me. I refuse. It's all your own doing, Kelly. Besides, building a good relationship with a stepmother who would casually throw away our real mother's mementos is impossible. For my sisters and me. I sympathize with your situation. But that's the responsibility of a spouse, right? We are living our new lives and have no intention of seeing you. Don't say that. I don't want to let go of my designer goods, luxury cars, or this house. You girls are the only ones I can rely on. You can even call me Mom. I have no intention of calling you that. We are strangers. I understand you're busy, Kelly, so we'll take care of our Father's Month memorial. Goodbye. After that, Kelly was repeatedly contacted by each of the affair partners' family and had to deal with a lot of complicated matters. Particularly, her affair partner's wife exploded in rage when she found out the affair, since she was pregnant with their third child, had been managing on her own, believing in her husband's busy schedule. Meanwhile, Kelly could not continue to lead a life extravagantly since she never tried to work. Soon, she had to sell all the designer goods and luxury cars she had bought with my father's money. She clung to city officers in tears, but he dismissed her with, "If life is that hard, please get a job." When she applied for social welfare, they introduced her to a job center with a straight face. She now quietly lives in a 40-year-old apartment, paying rent she can afford with her salary from part-time jobs. Meanwhile, the family home that Kelly had to let go was reclaimed by my eldest sister. She got engaged and decided to live there with her fiancé after renovating it. This has given us a place to talk about family memories again, and I'm thrilled. I've also started dating someone I met through work and am savoring my new life every day. If we don't protect ourselves, who will? Right. After all, you girls would just get married and leave once you find someone good. Wouldn't you? The parents said in unison, casting doubtful glances at us. Tears welled up in our mother's eyes, and our father was angry. Despite their rush to secure promises, I wish they'd trust their children more. My name is Allison. I'm a 30-year-old freelancer working from home on my computer. I live with my parents and my sister, Mandy. Ouch, ouch. My back has been hurting so much lately. It's unbearable. My father complained, dramatically exaggerating his pain. Are you okay, Dad? Please don't push yourself too hard. My mother responded equally dramatically, as she conspicuously rubbed his aching back. Both of my parents are still only 65 and haven't had any significant health issues until now. However, they've been showing us how bad their condition is, which made us worried. Actually, both of my parents are excessively anxious about their old age. They think that since we sisters are girls, we'll eventually marry and leave home, unable to care for them in their later years. But in reality, neither I at 30 nor Mandy at 28 have any marriage plans or boyfriends yet. As my mother continued to vigorously rub my father's back, her voice filled with concern. Standing before such parents, I felt compelled to say something. If it hurts that much, why not visit the hospital? I've heard of cases where people went to orthopedics for back pain and found nothing, only to discover an illness at the internist. What? My parents looked at me seriously, both latching on to my words. I reassured them it was just something I'd heard, adding, well, just to be safe. If it's really that painful, seeing a doctor might be a good idea. Instantly, my father asked, would you come with us? Considering our mother was there too, I declined to avoid crowding the waiting area at the hospital. They both looked disappointed and muttered, I see. Later, before my sister who had just returned home, my parents performed a skit where my mother now exaggerated her back pain, and my father dramatically took care of her. Watching from afar, Mandy looked at our parents with a bit of a fed-up expression, reacting almost the same way I did. But when it came to accompanying them to the hospital, she casually agreed. That's fine. Which delighted our parents so much that they practically jumped for joy. At dinner that night, Mandy's steak was noticeably bigger, clearly a reward for agreeing to go with them. A few days later, as Mandy was driving our parents to the hospital, in her flashy red convertible, our slightly embarrassed parents announced their destination to the neighbors. Watching from inside the house, I couldn't help but chuckle a bit, but I prayed for their tests to go smoothly. According to Mandy, who returned later, both of our parents' backs were fine and healthy. Peeking into the refrigerator while listening to her, I found some cake and asked my mother if I could have some. That's for Mandy. She accompanied us to the hospital, unlike you, Allison. What? All 4 cakes were rewards for my sister. It was clear to see the seriousness and intentions of our parents. Since then, our parents have continued testing which of us would care for them by complaining of headaches or stomach aches. As I often work from home and have a flexible schedule outside deadlines, I ended up doing much of the caretaking. I made porridge, prepared clothes, and felt almost like a caregiver. Meanwhile, Mandy, who prefers going out, prioritized her plans without much worry. It seemed I won this round, as I alone received lavish meals and rewards for a while. Our parents also began dealing with end-of-life matters such as wills, asset distribution, and taxes. In all of this, it was blatantly obvious. They were comparing how much each of us helped. As I was more familiar with computers and often at home, I had an advantage. But Elle didn't intend to outshine Mandy or try to win favor with our parents. I simply happened to be home more often. However, they began to look at me with expectant eyes. One day, Mandy approached me seriously. "Don't you think Mom and Dad have been acting strange lately? One minute they're in pain, the next they're in a good mood. Then they treat us coldly. Could it be some type of dementia?" I laughed off my sister's concern and said, "Maybe Dad and Mom are just worried about their old age? Neither of us is Mary. And they might be trying to figure out who would take care of them." Relieved that it wasn't dementia, Mandy sighed and said, "Taking care of them isn't just one person's responsibility, right? I don't plan on leaving it all to you." I was pleased with her sensible response. Exactly. Even if we both get married, we should cooperate. I wish they'd trust us more. But maybe they can't help but worry since we're both girls, I replied, realizing our parents had been overly anxious about being left alone by their two daughters. However, if something were to happen to our parents, Mandy and I would naturally be there to help. I hoped they would worry less about their old age and enjoy their lives now while they still could. After our parents saw that we noticed their odd behaviors, they kept quiet for a while. Then one night, while Mandy was away on a trip with friends, our parents called me to the living room and dropped a bombshell. "We've built a new house. We thought, how about it for you?" Confused by his abrupt mention of a new house, I prompted him to continue. "You don't have a boyfriend and aren't working in an office. So it seems unlikely you'll meet someone. The chances of you getting married are pretty low, right? That's why we want to entrust you with taking care of our parents in our old age," my father explained rather bluntly. It appeared they had assessed and compared Mandy and me, concluding that I, being older and more plain, seemed less likely to marry. They believed I was more obedient and better suited for caregiving. "Mandy is still in her 20s, right? Unlike you, she seems more likely to find someone. If you were the oldest son, taking care of us in old age would be impossible, wouldn't it? Basically, even if I meet someone I love and get married in the future, the condition is that my parents would come with me." They weighed which daughter would take care of them in their old age and chose me. They intended to secure care before either of us could marry and leave, buying a house in the suburbs as a means to ensure this commitment. Regardless of what happened next, the house was supposed to be their security, in return for our promise to look after them. Listening to my parents' plan, I honestly felt a discomfort as if my fate had been decided for me. As I listened to my father's words in shock, I looked at my mother's face. And she, with a beaming smile, said, "Isn't that a great idea? What about this house? We're selling it to my brother's son. It's an old house, but well located. When we said we were letting it go, he wanted it, so we decided to do that." My father continued, having moved forward with these plans on the assumption I would agree. However, this would likely not sit well with Mandy. My father casually added, "It can't be helped. In these times, we must carefully decide which daughter will take our future. Mandy likes to go out. Allison, on the other hand, seems capable of staying in and providing care." My father smirked, and Mother chimed in, "We'll tell Mandy to find a new place to move into tomorrow. Allison, if you could start studying caregiving soon, we'd be happy. If they're worried about their old age, they could just talk to me honestly. But to secretly weigh their options and cast one of us aside like that. Their fears of aging, they chose to manipulate and decide unilaterally who would be discarded." The next day, after hearing about this from my mother, Mandy confronted our parents. "I get it. I'm supposed to leave. But I can't understand how you can so easily dispose of the house we were born and raised in. Mandy accepted that she had been weighed and cast aside. She also felt indignation at our parents' decision to sell the familiar home. My father responded as if it were a matter of course. Indeed, it is the house you grew up in. But for the sake of our peaceful old age, it's necessary. My father, determined to secure a comfortable future for themselves, seemed willing to sacrifice anything for it. I wondered if that might even include Mandy, his own daughter. This approach by my parents felt excessive to me. Eventually, Mandy left home without much further discussion, resigned to the situation. Urged by our parents, I moved into the new house, while they stayed behind to finalize the sale of the old home before planning to move in with me. During this time, unexpected news arrived. Mandy was getting married. Her fiancé, the same age as her and apparently a highly accomplished guy, who became a manager at a young age. Furthermore, his parents already lived with their eldest son, meaning he wasn't the heir, which suddenly changed our parents' outlook. Rushed family introductions and wedding plans ensued. Her fiancé, despite his achievements, was a rare kind of decent young man who didn't boast about his success. After several discussions about the marriage, our parents grew quite fond of Mandy's fiancé. Living in the new house, I was unaware of these changes until Mandy called to inform me. She clearly thought that siding with her and her fiancé and living together would be more secure and beneficial for their future. By that time, I was already feeling overwhelmed living in the new house. One day, I went to visit my parents to talk. Before I could start, they hesitantly spoke up. Mandy's fiancé, he's really a good man. I could fall for him myself. He's sincere and cheerful, a truly good young man, my father said, praising Mandy's fiancé excessively. Then glanced at my mother with some difficulty. That's why, sorry, but we've decided to entrust our old age to Mandy and her husband. We initially thought of you, but a big company's director seems more reliable. I understood what my mother was trying to say, but decided to hear her out completely. So, we're giving the house to Mandy. Can you move out by tomorrow? So that was it. For my parents, the new house was a card to play for their secure old age. It's natural they'd want to take it back. But, Mom, didn't you hear? I've already demolished that house. My parents looked shocked and were speechless for a while, gaping at me. What did you just say? I demolished it. That house was a defective building. Both parents seemed unable to believe my words, their eyes darting around. I thought about discussing it with you. But with all the talk about Mandy's wedding, you wouldn't listen, would you? I had moved to the new house earlier and soon noticed something was off. Walking around inside, I felt the floors were uneven, and cracks appeared in the walls. Initially, it wasn't much of a concern, but the condition of the house worsened over time. Eventually, leaks became severe, and even minor rainfall led to flooding. I went to discuss it with my parents, but they were too caught up in Mandy's wedding news. So I missed the chance to inform them on time. But I told Mandy about it. She said she'd talk to you, so I thought you knew. I hadn't been able to tell my parents about the house's issues, so I informed Mandy. She was supposed to relay the message, but it seems she hadn't. Then, a couple of days ago, a demolition crew suddenly showed up and said they were tearing down the house, so I moved out. My revelation led to more questions from my parents. You moved out, where to? You haven't come back here, have you? My mother asked, puzzled. I sheepishly responded. To his place. He suggested we live together. It looks like I might be getting married." My parents were doubly surprised and exclaimed, "What?" Just then, Mandy returned home, saw me, and casually asked, "How's the demolition going?" Her question triggered my parents. "Wait a minute. What do you mean by demolishing the house? I paid for that house. How could you do something like this without consulting me?" Mandy calmly replied to our father. "Well, that house was defective, right? It was leaning badly, there were leaks. And the critical pillars were damaged. I consulted him. And he said the interior work was shoddy." At Mandy's words, my father became flustered. "No. I didn't skimp on purpose, but I did say to cut corners on unnecessary things." My mother glared at him sharply. "Maybe. That's why the construction company did a sloppy job. When I tried to contact them about the defects, their phone was already disconnected. Besides, the house was in our names, right? So we could decide to demolish it. It's useless to keep it if it's uninhabitable." My parents were deeply bowed by Mandy's straightforward reasoning. Perhaps Mandy had hastily decided on the demolition partly as retaliation for being disregarded by our parents. Actually, we wanted Mandy to look after us in our old age. We were going to give the house to you too, but, caught in their schemes, my parents couldn't argue much with Mandy, who had decided on the demolition. My father continued, and Mandy cheerfully replied, "Don't worry. We don't need a house in such an inconvenient location." Mandy suggested if the house was to be given, they might as well sell the demolished land and convert it into cash. After her marriage, she ignored the promise to care for our parents and lived in an urban condo. Soon after, her husband was transferred abroad, and they moved overseas abruptly. Our childhood home, having received a deposit, couldn't be said unsellable, and was duly passed on to a relative as planned. Mandy kept the money from the sale of the land, and the promise to take care of our parents became dubious. Eventually, they ended up living in a small condo by themselves. As for me, I was shocked to discover a fact about my longtime friend, whom I was about to marry. He was unexpectedly an heir. He knew the whole story of how I received the new house from my parents, and had agreed to take care of my parents' future. His parents had passed away, and he was the second son. Still, my parents, unable to immediately jump at this new situation, decided to live away from both daughters. I never thought marrying would sever ties with my parents. I was ready to rush to their side if needed. My husband knew this, and I believe my sister felt the same, even overseas. Our parents, unable to trust us fully, had tried to secure their future through visible means, which backfired. I plan to live life to the fullest now, without worrying too much about the future, hoping to set an example for my parents. I'm going to live with my parents since I have a kid. You, being broke, should leave. My brother shouted this out loud, and both our parents nodded as if to say exactly. Despite having been forced back to my parents' house, and continuously providing for living expenses while caring for my mom, it seems I'm easily written off. I'm Felicity, and I think my parents named me that because they wanted me to be cheerful as I grew up. However, since learning at 15 that my dad's ex was named Felicity, I've held doubts about the origin of my name. Knowing about my parents' embarrassing past is something a child would rather not know. And honestly, I wasn't very cherished during my childhood. My brother Mike, who is 3 years older, is smart and charming. Since both our parents wanted a boy, they cherished Mike, born as their first child, a boy. Apparently, our grandparents believed that the first child must be a boy. Under immense pressure, my mom successfully gave birth to a son and adored him more than anyone else. What about me, you ask? I wore Mike's hand-me-downs. The money from our grandparents had a clear disparity, and naturally, when relatives invited us out, it was always Mike. Normally, one might say, be patient because he's your older brother, but I was raised distinctly, being taught to step back and let the boys stand out due to some bizarre notion of ladylike behavior. In reality, I experienced treatment far less favorable, not just by a step, but by miles. However, my saving grace has always been my carefree nature. My parents used to say, "You never think about anything." But had I pondered too deeply, I'd probably have become a gloomy child, full of resentment towards my brother. He's him, and I'm me, and that's just fine. By embracing this quirky family dynamic, I've come to disregard my parents' attitudes. Despite the favoritism towards my brother, I still felt gratitude for being raised by my parents, and though my brother, who had a mean streak as a child, was part of my family, I never truly hated him. That sentiment wavered due to an incident when I was in my late 20s. My dad retired, and my mom, a homemaker, fell ill, leading to paralysis in her legs, necessitating full-time care. I had thought that with my dad retired, he would be by her side, providing peace of mind, but this was a naive thought. "Hey Felicity, I can't do anything, so come back home." What? No way, if I move back home, I won't be able to commute to work. Instead of saying you can't do anything, try studying or practicing a bit. What's with that tone, talking to your dad like that? Just quit your job and come back. Your mom's important to you, right? It's not that simple. With my dad being so controlling, my mom was left to sort out everything he needed. Now that she was incapacitated, he turned into a helpless man unable to do even household chores or care for her. He intended for me to return home and take her place. Since my brother worked closer to home, it would have made sense for him to help. But in times like these, why call on me, whom they had never cherished much? I had been living freely since moving out, determined not to be dominated by them. But then my dad began calling my company. This interference became a nuisance at work, drawing annoyed looks from my boss and colleagues. I loved my job, which I had worked so hard to get, and wanted to continue at all costs. However, driven nearly to neurosis by my dad's relentless calls, I couldn't perform my duties and reluctantly quit to return home. However, the family home was in a dreadful state. My retired dad, having nothing else to do, took up horse racing as a hobby and spent his entire pension on it as soon as it was disbursed. His drinking increased, often staying up drinking until dawn, with empty beer cans and wine bottles littered around the table. I had heard there was some savings for retirement, but barely a year into his retirement, the household finances were in shambles. No wonder he mumbled and hesitated when I suggested, aside from housework, you could hire a professional helper for caregiving, right? With utility bills in arrears until the pension came in, it was a cycle of immediate expenses. Even when the pension came in, it vanished instantly. Reluctantly, I started using my savings to stabilize our living conditions, and even renovated the house to be wheelchair accessible for my mom. Later, I found a job near my parents' home, entrusted my mom to daytime care services, and used my earnings, about $2,000 monthly, for caregiving and living expenses. My bank account, which I had been saving since my early working days, was now completely drained. No matter how much I worked, the outgoing expenses were too high. Yet, my dad neither worked nor managed finances. Increasingly relying on me, it was as if I had become his host. My daily life, filled with household chores in the morning, work during the day, and caregiving at night, was reaching its limit. I really wanted to place my mom in a care facility and leave my worthless dad behind, so I could use the entire sum being consumed for his sake on my own savings and living expenses. However, despite not doing anything himself, my dad vehemently opposed the idea of putting my mom in a care facility. My mom herself wondered, "Why should I go to a facility when you are taking care of me?" And thus, I couldn't get her agreement. I tried discussing it with Mike, but as expected, he didn't care, and it seemed inevitable that I would be the one to sacrifice. That's how I ended up trapped in a prison called home. It was about 3 years into this hellish cohabitation when suddenly Mike announced, post facto, that he had registered his marriage because my girlfriend is pregnant. And he came home with his wife Sandra, whom I had never met before. I was looking forward to meeting Mike's sister, but you're nothing like him. Not cute at all. Sandra laughed the moment she saw me, an insult that naturally disgusted me. Despite being her first visit, Sandra walked around the house as if she owned it, barged into my room to use my cosmetics like testers, and said, "I like this, give it to me." She even rummaged through the drawers where my mom's jewelry was stored, muttering ominous things like, "How much does 18-karat gold sell for these days?" She seemed like a dangerous woman. Definitely not a good woman. I thought it would be better to cut ties with her, even though they were already registered as married. However, all my dad and mom could think about was wanting to hold a grandchild, or wanting to name it. Their heads were filled only with thoughts of the upcoming grandchild, which I even found enviable in its carefree nature. I was a little scared of becoming related to this sister-in-law, and my bad premonition came true that very day. "But I'm so nervous about raising my first child, can someone help me?" Sandra said in a sugary voice, twirling her hair around her finger. Then my dad, who had been ogling Sandra's chest, stretched his lips and said, "Then why don't you live with us?" "Really, Dad?" "Of course." While my parents and Mike and his wife got excited about living together, I couldn't help but ask, "Isn't there not enough room? What are you going to do? You should just leave." "What?" Stunned by my dad's words, my mom also smiled and added, "Yes, that's a good idea. Act quickly, get out fast." Despite feeling like I had been very filial, it was shocking how quickly my parents turned their backs on me. Wait. Even if I'm driven out of the house now, I've been paying for caregiving all this time, and I don't even have the money to move. What about Mom's care? I'll take care of the money for caregiving and everything else. Since I'm employed at a major company and not a small local one like Felicity's, I've got enough money. Hearing that, my dad slapped my back and said, "All right, Felicity, go pack your bags and get out today." He looked pleased as if he had secured a high-quality parasite host. "Get out today. It's snowing outside, where does he expect me to live? Why?" This is ridiculous. I couldn't help but voice my true feelings. "It's not ridiculous. You're stupid. Listen, I'll only say this once, so hear it well. I'm going to live with my parents since I have a kid. You, being broke, should leave." I looked at my parents in disbelief. Even my mom, whom I had desperately cared for, smiled and said, "I want to be with my grandchild, give up." My dad even started packing my things into a bag and threw it at me while saying, "See? Get out. Please wait a few days until I find a place to live." I pleaded, but he forcibly pulled my arm and I was thrown out of the house. No matter how many times I rang the intercom, it was ignored. After being manipulated by my parents for so long, and now by my brother. My life isn't a toy. I had always smiled in the past, despite being treated coldly, as a form of self-defense. But both my parents and brother are completely mistaken. They think it's okay because nothing bothers her. It's not a joke. Don't mess with me. I left my home crying, wandering the streets at night, and somehow found a taxi, then stayed at a motel. When I contacted a friend who lived locally, by some miracle, she said I could stay at her place for a while. Friends are truly treasures. Relying on her, I managed to save money, and eventually restored enough savings to live on my own again. I haven't saved enough to leave my hometown yet, but I don't want to have anything to do with my family anymore. So I want to move further away. I've decided to move out of the state once I save more money. That was my plan. However, about 2 years after that night, my dad and Mike suddenly showed up at my place. It seems they had tracked down this address at the municipal office. "Who might you be?" I deliberately spoke to them as if they were strangers. Then, both knelt down together and apologized deeply, showing repentance. "Please, help us. We want you to drive out Mike's wife from our house." My dad pleaded with tears in his eyes. When I asked what was going on, it seemed the family home had gotten into a mess. After giving birth, Sandra had settled into momhood enough to laugh and say, "I don't want to live with you pathetic people anymore," and kicked out Mike and my parents from the house. Moreover, my dad, completely charmed by Sandra, had managed to be manipulated into changing the house's registration into Sandra's name. It was more like he had given the house to her rather than lost it. I had heard that Sandra had originally fallen for Mike at first sight and pursued him ardently until they got together. But even at that time, I felt something was off. Mike, who was a charming and cute child, had grown up to be a burly man covered in hair from practicing judo. Far from handsome. Sandra, thin and cute, could have chosen any man she wanted. Why she fell for him was beyond me. In reality, Sandra was after Mike's money, and there were other men involved. The child's dad was supposedly Mike, but she continued her affairs even after marriage. After a quarrel between Mike and Sandra about this, the next day, everyone was kicked out of the house. That's probably because Sandra, sensing that her affair might come to light someday, cleverly manipulated my dad to change the house's registration. They're all fools. And now, they're not even living with the grandchild they were so looking forward to, and everything has backfired. In addition to that, Sandra had been secretly using my mom's credit card. And by the time I noticed, she had maxed it out buying appliances and jewelry. Well, she seemed like the type to have sticky fingers. I had always had a bad feeling about her. So hearing this didn't really surprise me, it felt more like as expected. I don't really have parents or a brother in my life. So, let me ask again, who are you? At that moment, the color drained from my dad and brother's faces. Are you going to abandon us too? Since then, Mom has become bedridden and can't even sit in a wheelchair. Don't you feel sorry for her being kicked out? My dad shouted. Weren't you the ones who kicked me out because you wanted to be with your grandchild? Mom told me to give up, so I gave up being part of your family. And it's Dad's fault I was kicked out because he changed the property's title, right? Unable to say anything, my dad just clenched his teeth. Wait, Felicity. We're family, let's help each other. Mike reached out his hand, but I slapped it away. When I was caring for Mom, you who refused to call me even though I asked him many times to help me because it was hard for me to be alone, would say that? Well, that's. As Mike struggled for words, my dad shouted. Forget about Mike for a second, don't you have any gratitude towards your parents? Have you forgotten all the favors we've done for you? Hearing that, I narrowed my eyes and glared at them both. I thought I owed you for raising me, so I quit the job I loved to live with you. And contributed money. I put up with everything, but you kicked me out. I'm not naive enough to still say thank you after all that. We've apologized for that. So an apology fixes everything? Then I'll apologize too. Sorry for abandoning you. I apologize, but I won't help. But please forgive me. What are you saying? You're so insolent. As my dad lunged at me, I instinctively used the self-defense techniques I had learned at school. Ouch, 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 he cried out, crouching on the spot. Mike, instead of caring for our dad, just stared at me in astonishment. I threw salt at them from the entranceway, feeling a strong urge to drive them away. Ah, they cried, covering their eyes. Don't show me those greedy faces anymore. Go back home. I yelled as I threw more salt, pushing them out the door. People passing by turned their heads at my voice. But my anger was too high to feel embarrassed. Then my dad shouted, Wait. If we talk, we'll surely understand each other. We're family by blood. Sorry, but I think the people I'm related to by blood are the last ones I can understand in this world. Really, there are no decent people in this family but me. Don't involve me in your lives ever again. Unable to open their eyes from the salt, they hesitated and then retreated from the entrance. I managed to keep them away from my room. Listen, I'll say this one last time. Don't ever involve me again. I consider all my family dead, so even if something happens to you, I won't visit you in the hospital or attend your funeral. I glared at them one last time and closed the front door. They lingered at the door saying, We just want to talk, but when I threatened to call the police, they finally left. Afterward, I received several letters from my dad. Apparently, my parents had moved in with my aunt, his sister. The letters pleaded for help, saying they felt sorry for themselves, but to me, it was my aunt who deserved sympathy for having to take in the elderly couple. Ultimately, in the third letter, it was revealed that my dad had pushed the caregiving responsibilities onto my aunt, which caused trouble with her husband. And they were kicked out again. Now they were renting a cheap apartment, while trying to regain their family home, fighting again with Sandra. They probably didn't have the money to hire a lawyer or to take good advice. And since my dad had made the title change himself, there seemed little chance of winning. Mike was unable to divorce Sandra and lived separately and accidentally got involved with another woman, labeled as a cheater. The woman he got involved with was supposedly a friend of Sandra's. Likely a honey trap, but there's no proof. In the end, the divorce talks were stuck with Mike demanding compensation, claiming the household fell apart because of my wife's cheating, and Sandra countering, portraying herself as a tragic wife, saying, He claims I cheated while raising a child without proof, but in fact, he was the one cheating, demanding a high compensation and child support since neither had proof of the other's infidelity. What a messy situation, yikes. In the meantime, I got married to someone I met while switching jobs for the umpteenth time. It was an office romance, so we were cautious about dating publicly. Instead, we rented apartments close to each other and went back and forth, spending most days at one place or the other, essentially living together. One day, he casually proposed, saying, "This actress is getting married. Shall we?" It felt like he was suggesting a trip to the convenience store, which is still a fond memory for me. We're both down-to-earth types who aren't good at making a show, so I'm glad he didn't go for a flashy surprise. I'm the type who doesn't show much reaction, so it would have been awkward to respond. But life is full of surprises, it seems. 2 years into our marriage, I found myself pregnant with triplets, having never had siblings or much experience with small children. I was completely overwhelmed. It's hard enough with one, let alone 3. But fortunately, my husband and in-laws were very supportive, and somehow we're managing. We had 1 boy and 2 girls. When I found out, I was determined to love them equally. But as it turns out, that resolution was unnecessary, because all the children are adorable. I end up giving my all to all 3 of them anyway. Of course, with 3, it's not always possible to hold hands with mommy equally. In such cases, we make it fun by saying, after 100 steps, it's someone else's turn. But kids can be pretty unpredictable. 1 minute they're all about mom, and the next they're like, "Today, I want dad's hand." Well, it seems to the kids that both their dad and mom love them equally, which is all I could ask for. From now on, true to my name, I'll build a bright, happy family for everyone, and then, the 3 of them, together, scribble all over the walls of our new house with crayons. Hey! That doesn't make mommy and daddy happy, stop that. They do everything together, even this, oh well, the walls are now colorful. Alrighty, time to grab the laundry detergent and get back to work. Being a mom is a never-ending journey. Lauren. I've brought some snacks. Let's have some coffee. My mother-in-law returned from shopping and handed me a bag full of peanut snacks. What? Something wrong? I'm allergic to peanuts. Oh. Was that so? Sorry. Despite knowing I'm allergic, my mother-in-law intentionally buys peanut snacks. Her blatant harassment has been exhausting. My name is Lauren, a 29-year-old housewife. I originally met my husband Jack at work, where he was my senior. Our relationship grew through work, and we eventually got married. I quit my job and moved in with Jack's parents. Initially, I thought living with his kind parents would be manageable. However, my mother-in-law's attitude changed over time. "Since you're the daughter-in-law, you should do all the household chores." What? What? Got a problem? You're a housewife, aren't you? It's only natural since Jack is providing for you. Ah, yes. Even though my mother-in-law had promised to share household duties before our marriage, suddenly, it all fell on me. While she helps out when Jack and my father-in-law are around, during weekdays, when it's just the 2 of us, she dumps all the chores on me. If it were only that, it would have been better. When you wipe with water, make sure to dry it as well, or you'll leave water spots. Understood. Okay, redo it from scratch. Yes. My mother-in-law constantly criticizes my cleaning, forcing me to redo everything if she finds any spot she dislikes. It's surprising you even considered becoming a housewife. You hardly did any bridal training. It's a nuisance having someone like you marry into the family. Sorry. Learn the household chores faster, will you? Yes. While I clean, my mother-in-law lounges around watching TV, occasionally throwing complaints or sarcastic remarks my way. Before marriage, my mother-in-law was kind, so I was bewildered by how much she changed after we started living together. Why are you still cleaning there? It's nearly evening. Haven't you done the shopping yet? No, I haven't yet. Hurry up and finish so you can go buy groceries for dinner. Understood. Every day, I'm overworked and criticized by my mother-in-law. However, when Jack or my father-in-law is around, she stops all complaints and sarcasm, pretending nothing's wrong. When they return from work, she brightly says, "Welcome back. Dinner is ready, even though I was the one who cooked. Today, I tried making clam chowder. How is it?" "Yeah, it's good. This soup is unusual for us. My mother-in-law usually only makes vegetable soup." So my father-in-law seemed surprised when clam chowder was served. I thought I'd expand my repertoire, so I learned how to make it from Lauren. Right, Lauren? My mother-in-law looked at me with a piercing gaze. Ah, yes. That's nice. I couldn't admit that I made it, forced to go along with her story. My mother-in-law pretends she does all the household chores herself. Oh, did you rearrange the decor? It looks cleaner. Yes. With the family growing, I thought I'd tidy up a bit. That's nice. In reality, under my mother-in-law's orders, I had moved and organized heavy items by myself during the day. Without realizing it, Jack sometimes admonished me. Don't push all the chores onto my mom. You should be more proactive. You're a housewife. Deceived by my mother-in-law's act, Jack was fooled. Unable to speak the truth, all I could do was endure. Taking advantage of my silence, my mother-in-law's harassment only escalated. Today, I'll go shopping. It was unusual for my mother-in-law to offer to shop, so I wondered what was up. Then, a few minutes later, she returned and said, "Lauren, I've brought some snacks. Let's have coffee," and she handed me the snacks. It was the first time Mom had bought snacks for me, and I wondered why she was being so kind today. Ah, thank you. However, I was shocked when I looked inside the shopping bag. What? What's wrong? Grinning, my mother-in-law peered into my face. I'm allergic to peanuts." "Oh. Was that so? Sorry." Despite my mother-in-law knowing about my peanut allergy, she deliberately bought only peanut snacks. If I had eaten them by mistake, it would have been disastrous. Sorry. My mother-in-law chuckled continuously, seemingly amused by harassing me. I was fed up with her behavior. One day, while I was out shopping, my mother-in-law called. "Yes, hello?" My hand slipped and I accidentally dropped a flower pot from the balcony onto your car. Sorry about that. It wasn't on purpose, so forgive me, okay? I won't compensate though. I'm currently driving, you know? What? So, I'm out shopping in my car right now. Which means the car you dropped the flower pot on must be Jack's, right? What? No way. It seemed my mother-in-law intended to harass me by dropping the flower pot onto a car. but she mistakenly dropped it on Jack's car instead. Please check again. I could hear my mother-in-law panicking and rushing down the stairs over the phone. No way, it's true. The colors are the same and they look quite similar. It's understandable that you couldn't tell them apart from above. Wait a minute. Why is Jack's car here? Your car is always parked here. Why today of all days? That day, Jack had taken a day off and said he wouldn't use the car. So I swapped our usual parking spots to make parking smoother. It was a good thing I did. What am I supposed to tell Jack? My mother-in-law hadn't anticipated that it would be Jack's car. She was visibly flustered. I had to struggle to hold back my laughter. You can say the same thing you told me. Just say it wasn't on purpose and apologize, and I'm sure Jack will forgive you. Apologizing won't fix this. It's Jack's car. That really made me angry. So, it's okay to do whatever to my car as long as you apologize? Of course. You don't even work. So you being cheeky enough to have your own car is outrageous. You don't even need a car. What about Jack? He uses his car for commuting every day. What will he do for work tomorrow? It's a punishment for trying to harass me. You deserve it. I said it wasn't on purpose. It's pretty obvious that it was. Enough. I can't talk to you. My mother-in-law hung up the phone. Curious about what happened next, I cut my shopping short and headed home. When I arrived home and saw Jack's car, the windshield was shattered. Much worse than I imagined. Jack really liked his car and used it daily for work. So I worried he would be very upset. I hurried inside. Ah, welcome back. Despite my worries, Jack was as usual. My father-in-law was also acting normal. So they probably didn't know about the car yet. I decided not to tell Jack immediately and confronted my mother-in-law first. Mother, haven't you said anything about the car? The car? What about it? My mother-in-law feigned ignorance. Jack's car. Are you planning to keep quiet about it? You're saying I damaged Jack's car? What? I was speaking quietly so Jack wouldn't hear. But suddenly my mother-in-law raised her voice. Hearing that, Jack asked, "What happened to my car?" Apparently, Lauren damaged your car. Mother, seriously? It seemed my mother-in-law was planning to blame it all on me. Is that so? I'll go check. Jack hurried to the entrance. It's his precious car, after all. You're going to get in trouble. My mother-in-law smirked. What is this? Jack's voice came from outside, unable to hide his shock at the state of his car. Why has it turned out like this? After checking the car, Jack then confronted me. Don't be too mad. Lauren didn't mean any harm, and she said she'll compensate. What? I was appalled by my mother-in-law's selfishness. That's unavoidable, but why is the windshield shattered by a flower pot? What happened? Jack seemed more puzzled than angry. Lauren, did you do this on purpose? Mother, enough is enough. I had reached my limit. Hearing our commotion at the entrance, my father-in-law came over. What's this? It's terrible. Right? Lauren was the one who did it. What? Really? Everyone turned to look at me. Then, I said, there's something I want everyone to hear. And took out my cell phone. I started playing a recorded conversation. It was the call my mother-in-law had just made to me. Actually, I had prepared for this moment, fearing future harassment. I had bought a voice recorder and installed an app to record phone calls. And it paid off today. Hey! What is this about? My mother-in-law tried to grab my phone, but my father-in-law stopped her. Just be quiet. My phone had recorded the sound of the pot falling from the balcony. And my mother-in-law's panicked voice upon realizing it hit Jack's car. Seeing my mother-in-law's defeated slump, Jack and my father-in-law looked furious after hearing the entire conversation. Mom, what's this all about? You just said Lauren did it, didn't you? Well, that's... Confronted by the two, my mother-in-law looked like she might burst into tears any moment. Why did you even take the pot from the entrance to the balcony? Were you really trying to damage Lauren's car on purpose? No. That's when I revealed all the harassment my mother-in-law had subjected me to. So that was it. Sorry for not noticing sooner. I'm really sorry. Upon learning everything, they both apologized to me. My mother-in-law stayed silent, looking down. I can't live with Mom anymore. I'm moving out of this house. What? I don't want to see your face for a while. Oh no. It's only right. You have no right to stop this. I'm sorry. I'll apologize. It's too late. It's a shame, especially now that we're expecting a grandchild. Grandchild? Indeed, I found out a few days ago that I was pregnant. I had told Jack. But we were planning to surprise our parents and hadn't told them yet. What? You're pregnant? I didn't intend to announce it this way, but since we're leaving, I thought I should tell you at the end. I can't believe it. My mother-in-law, who had been looking forward to a grandchild, was even more disheartened when she learned of my pregnancy. So you won't let me see the baby once it's born? Of course. After what you've done, we can't trust you not to harm her. I won't do anything. You've been horrible to Lauren. We can't trust you. Jack shouted, and my mother-in-law had no reply. It's a shame, but it's your own fault. This is what happens when you engage in such foolishness. I'm sorry. My mother-in-law begged for forgiveness repeatedly. But considering everything she had done, I couldn't forgive her. I can't forgive you. Oh no. Afterwards, Jack and I moved out and started our own life. My mother-in-law seemed to remain depressed, staying in her room and hardly doing any household chores, often arguing with my father-in-law. As for me, being away from my mother-in-law allowed me to finally live peacefully. Thanks to that, I was able to give birth to a healthy baby girl as planned. We rented a house near my parents, where I could raise my child safely and happily. And she's growing up well. Our days are calm and filled with happiness. Later, my mother-in-law sent apology letters and emails, showing she was reflecting on her actions. Seeing this, I decided to let her meet her granddaughter. I was prepared to cut ties again at any hint of unpleasantness. But my mother-in-law seemed to understand and didn't say anything inappropriate. Now, I'm even considering visiting her occasionally. My sister is super beautiful, right? I've always been proud of her. The day I met my husband's family for the first time, he told me this. At that moment, I took it as a sign he was family person, but I later realized that was a huge mistake. His sister Cindy was indeed beautiful but had a terrible personality. Every time she saw me, she'd say things like, "Ugly girl," or "Your outfit's lame." My husband is an extreme sister's boy and always takes Cindy's side. I was getting fed up with him. One day, when I inherited a luxury car from my father's estate, trouble ensued. My husband said, "Cindy and her husband want the car." Cindy also agreed. We just had a baby, so it's perfect. Of course, I refused, but Cindy took the car without permission. Hours later, she started calling me non-stop in a panic. My name is Sarah Morris, 28 years old. I work hard every day as an office worker. I met my husband Billy through a mutual friend. We hit it off due to his bright and kind nature and married after about 6 months of dating. We began living together in our own house. We've been married for about 2 years, but we don't have children yet. From the outside, we might seem like a happy couple. However, since our marriage, I've always had uneasy feelings toward Billy and one other person, his sister Cindy. Cindy is 4 years older than Billy. She has a model-like beautiful face and an excellent figure. She looks young, and some might even mistake her for being younger than me. Despite her looks, she has a very bad personality, always gossiping about others. She is selfish and loud. She must get what she wants. I'm more on the plain and unremarkable look, so she really looked down on me. She constantly makes snide remarks at me. Hey, you've gained weight recently, right? Your short legs look even shorter. And what about that outfit? Its color and pattern are so dull and gloomy. You're not beautiful, so you should at least try to dress well. Yes. I suppose so. It's good that my brother married you. Otherwise, you would have been single forever, right? With your looks, you could only marry someone like my brother. It was utterly rude. Why do I have to be put down this way? Cindy not only looks down on me, but also thinks little of her own brother, Billy. Billy must have had a hard time having such a sister. But he didn't dislike her. In fact, Billy was an extreme sister's boy. He idolizes Cindy and does whatever she says, so they never argue. I once asked Billy about this. Why don't you dislike your sister, even though she treats you so roughly? It's not a strange thing. My sister is super beautiful, right? I'm proud of that. I didn't quite understand what he meant. What do you mean? I've always been bad at both studies and sports, with nothing to boast about. But when I show off my sister, everyone is surprised and praises her. That's why I don't think about opposing her. He lacks self-confidence but feels superior because his sister is beautiful? It's similar to people who brag about knowing famous celebrities. I thought it was a pathetic story based on others' achievements, but I didn't say it aloud. Saying it wouldn't change the nature Billy had become over the years. Cindy also seems to understand and exploit Billy's feelings. She lives in an apartment near our house with her husband, who is an elite company employee often away on business trips. He was at our wedding but seemed a quiet and gentle man. When her husband isn't around, and Cindy needs a man's help, that's when Billy's needed. She would call him for trivial matters. The light bulb's about to go out, come and change it. There's a cockroach, come and get rid of it. The groceries are too heavy, come pick me up in the car. Buy groceries in my stead. And so on. Since our honeymoon, such has been the case, and I've hardly had any time alone with Billy. Probably Cindy calls Billy over to annoy me. I think it's inappropriate for someone over 30, but Billy always happily goes. Even when I try to stop him, he doesn't listen. Hey, are you going to your sister's place again? Isn't this too frequent? Shouldn't she handle simple chores herself? Then he argued. Don't be so cold. My sister relies on me, and it would be pitiful not to go. I need to be there for her. However, even when Billy finishes the tasks, Cindy hardly offers him coffee before sending him back. That's fine. I want to be helpful to my sister. He thinks. I can't comprehend his mindset. That was truly the worst day. We had a reservation for a fancy dinner on my birthday. Right before we were supposed to leave, he got a call from Cindy. I had a bad feeling. Hello, Cindy? What's up? Okay, I'll be right there. Wait. Did your sister call you out for something again? She said it started raining while she was out shopping. She doesn't have an umbrella and seems really stuck. Are you really putting my birthday aside for such a trivial matter? I was astonished. She could wait for the rain to stop or take a taxi home. There were plenty of options. Yet, Billy was eager to go and pick up Cindy. So, you were supposed to celebrate my birthday today, right? What are we going to do about dinner? Just go by yourself. You can eat my portion too. We can celebrate your birthday next year. I'm going to pick up my sister. What? Something snapped in my mind. The thought of continuing to live like this was unbearable. That day, when Billy came back, I told him I wanted a divorce. I've reached my limit. I can't continue with someone who neglects me like this. Let's get a divorce. However, Billy was shaken by my words. What? Divorce? Why? I'm not cheating, and I do my share of the chores. Why would you want to divorce me? Billy's confused face made it clear he didn't understand my feelings. I explained the situation and asked him to distance himself from Cindy, but he said, I can't do that. If so, then we have no choice but to divorce. I declared, but he cried. I don't want that either. We argued a lot about this issue and talked for a long time. In the end, we didn't divorce, nor did we distance ourselves from Cindy. Instead, we made a promise that Billy would consult with me before doing anything for Cindy. Considering his past behavior, I couldn't trust Billy easily. That's why I decided to prepare the divorce papers in advance. Billy does the household chores if I ask him to. Maybe he will change. I thought and decided to wait and see. Then one day, tragedy struck. My father suddenly collapsed and passed away. The ambulance was too late. My father was always kind to his family. To think he would die so suddenly. I was so sad I couldn't stop crying. However, sad as I was, I had to prepare for the funeral. My mother, left alone, must have been anxious. Cindy, my sister-in-law, said, I'm not good with such gloomy places. And didn't attend the funeral. It's terrible that she wouldn't attend her brother-in-law's parents' funeral. After my father's funeral, my mother said, I want you to inherit your father's car. She doesn't have a license, and my car is old. My father's car was a large luxury vehicle. He had taken great care of it, and it held sentimental value. We should cherish it as a memory of my father. That's what I thought. But when Cindy came over with her newborn baby, she started an unbelievable conversation. Just stopping by. The car parked outside, the one you inherited? It looks so cool. It would suit me well. What? As I was confused by Cindy's sudden remark, Billy interjected with a grin. You know, my sister's family want a car. I thought it would be just right, so I told her about your father's car. Yeah. We just had a baby, so it's perfect. Give it to us as a gift. Billy, there's no problem with me taking the car, right? Of course, it's fine. Sarah has her small car anyway. Billy and Cindy were moving forward with their conversation, leaving me out. I quickly intervened. Wait. I'm planning to get rid of my small car, so I could give that to you. But not my father's car. I firmly refused. How could I give my late father's precious car to Cindy, with whom I'm not close? Cindy looked very displeased. A big car is necessary. We need it to transport the kids. My husband wouldn't want a small car either. Stop being stingy and hand over the car. If that's the case, you should buy one yourself. No matter what you say, I will not hand over the car. It's a memento from my father. I couldn't back down. Then Billy chimed in. Sarah, don't be so selfish. The luxury car suits my beautiful sister Cindy much better, doesn't it? It doesn't match your plain face. Just graciously give her your father's car. Even in such a situation, Billy sided with Cindy. That's when my patience finally ran out. I refuse. I will not give up the car. I stood my ground firmly. That day, Cindy backed down, grumbling, but eventually returned home. However, I knew she wouldn't give up easily. That's when I decided to take drastic action. It was time to cut ties with them completely. 2 days later, my luxury car was taken without permission. The culprit was likely Cindy. I had left the keys in my room, and it seems she had sneaked in when she visited our house. But there was no need to panic. I had prepared beforehand. Hours later, I received non-stop calls from my sister-in-law. I wanted to ignore them, but she was persistent, so I reluctantly answered. "What's going on? I might get arrested by the police." Cindy had been caught by the police at her favorite brand shop driving the luxury car, and she was accused of stealing it. I responded, "Oh, you realized? Well, it's not a strange story. You stole my car, so it's natural that you would get arrested. Don't say such horrible things like I stole it. I was just taking the car." Billy even said, "Don't worry about Sarah, just take the car." "So, this car is mine." Quickly explained to the police that it's a misunderstanding. Cindy was still ordering me around, even now. I decided it was time to give her a dose of reality. Unfortunately, that excuse won't work. Billy and I are already divorced, so we are now strangers. "What? You got divorced?" Cindy screamed in shock. Indeed, after she had left our house previously, I had submitted the divorce papers at the town hall. Although Billy had apologized after our last big fight and promised there wouldn't be a next time, I had already filled out the divorce papers and kept them ready. When I felt that Cindy might steal my father's car after our argument, I immediately went to submit the divorce papers. Since Billy and I were now strangers, and Cindy was effectively nothing to me, her excuse of just borrowing my sister-in-law's car wouldn't hold. The house we had lived in was originally my grandmother's, so I was the legal owner. I insisted that Billy leave, and he was kicked out, crying, "I don't want to split up." But my decision to divorce was firm. I had been betrayed by Billy multiple times over Cindy, and when he sided with his sister over my father's car, I had lost all affection for him. After kicking Billy out, I noticed my father's heirloom car was missing. I immediately knew it was Cindy's doing and tried to call her, but she didn't answer, likely on purpose since I could see the read receipts on the messages. That's when I decided to report it to the police. It was a clear case of theft. Someone had entered the house and taken the car keys and the car without permission. I had informed the police about a few places Cindy might go, so they found her quickly. Once she realized her situation was dire, she called me, pleading, "Please forgive me. My husband thinks you gave me the car. If he finds out I stole it, he will divorce me." I coldly refused her plea. "No. I can't forgive someone who stole my father's heirloom car. If you hadn't stolen the car, you wouldn't have been arrested by the police. You brought this on yourself. I'm truly sorry. I won't ever do something like this again. It's too late. You have always looked down on me and ridiculed me. Why should I help you? Let's handle this through lawyers from now on." With that, I hung up. Cindy was subsequently arrested and ended up with a criminal record. When my in-laws asked about the situation, I explained everything that had led to the divorce and played back recordings of Cindy's harsh words and Billy siding with his sister. My in-laws are good people and apologized repeatedly for what their daughter had done. They even offered a substantial sum as compensation for the trouble caused by Billy and Cindy. I liked my in-laws, so although I said, "Don't worry about it," they insisted, and I gratefully accepted. I regret becoming distant from them, but I don't regret divorcing Billy. Just when I thought it was all settled, the story continued. A month later, Billy called, asking to get back together. I had been busy and completely forgot to block his number. He started updating me on things I didn't ask about. Cindy was released but was divorced by her husband for stealing. Apparently, she's lost custody of her children due to her lack of financial capability. Cindy always had a spending problem and often neglected the kids. Her husband had been considering divorce regardless of my situation. Billy had said that his sister and her husband wanted the car, but her husband was not involved in the theft. Instead, he repeatedly apologized to me for Cindy stealing my father's car. Cindy is now working in a factory owned by Billy's relatives. She can't escape because she is surrounded by strict people and she's working hard. Billy, too, was kicked out by his in-laws for not stopping Cindy's outburst. He wasn't disowned, but he's not allowed to live in the family home anymore. Sarah, now that you're gone, I finally understand how much I took you for granted. The house is a mess, and I'm just eating microwave meals. I was wrong. I've reflected on my actions. Can we start over? I flatly rejected Billy's plea for reconciliation. It's impossible. I no longer have any affection for you. I can't be with someone who prioritizes his sister over me. If you contact me again, I'll consult the police. With that, I hung up without waiting for his response and blocked his number. Since then, I've been enjoying peaceful days. I'm put off by marriage for now and am planning to enjoy living alone for a while. Eek! The venue staff screamed. In a flash, a Coca-Cola stain spread on the pristine white wedding dress. On the morning of my wedding day, I was dumbfounded by what happened. A child did it. The ceremony is cancelled now, my mother-in-law said, laughing. On the most significant day of my life. She looked satisfied to have given me the ultimate harassment. Completely unaware of the shocking things that were about to unfold. I'm Amy Brown. I'm 28 years old and work at a company. I've decided to marry Howard Smith, who is 2 years my senior and a colleague at work. After dating for 2 years. I met Howard 3 years ago, when I was transferred to the PR department where he was a senior. He was the son of the company president and famously the next president, so at first, I was nervous and unsure how to interact with him. However, he never rested on his laurels and was passionate about his work. And he was humble towards me, his junior. One day, he invited me out for a meal and confessed his feelings. Initially, we started as friends, but as we dated more, I found joy in being with him and naturally fell for him. By the time we had been dating for 2 years, we had become indispensable to each other. I had met his parents, who were always welcoming. And we had started discussing our future. That's why when he proposed, I immediately accepted. The following is when I went to greet his family at their home to announce our marriage. Hello. Long time no see. His mother greeted me with a smile. His father, the company president, kindly said, "Good to see you. Make yourself at home." We were led into the spacious living room, and I sat on the sofa opposite his parents. After some small talk, he announced our marriage. "I'm going to marry Amy." "Oh, really?" At that moment, my mother-in-law looked me up and down as if sizing me up. I nervously looked down. I've been with her for 2 years and realized she's the one. His father joyfully said, "That's great. Howard, congratulations. I'm relieved Amy is your partner. I want you two to be happy." I felt relieved to hear this. "Are you serious?" But my relief was short-lived as my mother-in-law began sternly. "Amy, how did you get close to him? How did you ingratiate yourself with him?" The usual elegant and calm face of his mother had transformed into something monstrous. "Mom, calm down." He tried to soothe her, but her anger seemed uncontainable. "Amy, your family runs a small bar in the countryside, right?" "Yes, that's right." I can't believe Howard would even consider marrying someone from that family. I thought it was just a casual thing when I let them go out. "Stop it." His father restrained her as she looked ready to grab me by the collar. She must be after the money. I won't accept such a filthy girl as a bride. Her breakdown terrified me, and I froze. Mom, enough, he said calmly. She's important to me. I don't know what you've misunderstood, but I've always been serious and sincerely dating her. I've told you many times to marry someone suitable. A girl like this lowers our family's status. Be quiet now, his father sternly told her. Amy, I'm really sorry for my wife's rude remarks. I felt embarrassed as the president apologized. No. I approve of your marriage. She's the woman Howard chose, so you should accept her too. His mother looked down and remained silent for the rest of the day. We later visited my parents, and they approved of the marriage. While it was a concern that his mother hadn't accepted our marriage, we registered our union. Regarding work after marriage, I liked my job and wanted to keep my social connections, so I decided to continue. My husband also approved of me continuing to work. The wedding preparations started around this time. On days off, my mother-in-law began visiting our house uninvited. My husband said it was okay not to greet her, but I couldn't ignore her, so I let her in. Then, she invariably started with her insults and sarcasm. So, Amy is continuing her job? Quit your job to support Howard. As a future president's wife, you're disqualified. Every time my mother-in-law visited, it made my stomach hurt. Mom, please go home. My husband always protected me, but his mother's sarcasm never ceased. I believed she would accept me eventually. And even when she came over and spewed sarcasm, I faced it. Later, when I went to try on the wedding dress, my mother-in-law forcibly came along. No matter what I wore, she complained, that doesn't suit you at all. You have no class, whatever you wear looks cheap. My husband tried to protect me by repeatedly telling her to stop harassing me. When my husband wasn't home, she would come over. And the insults would get even worse. Everyone will be disappointed that you're the bride. Get a divorce quickly. I've been mentally exhausted by my mother-in-law's relentless nagging. Please don't say such things. I responded with a forced smile, but I felt down inside. The thought of having to deal with my mother-in-law for the rest of my life saddened me. My husband has repeatedly asked his father to stop my mother-in-law's harassment and insults, and it seems his father has been trying to persuade her. However, my mother-in-law insists she's done nothing wrong. As a company president, my father-in-law can't always keep an eye on her. He told me to avoid going out during breaks. However, this led to her calling me directly. You're just a useless bride, so it's time for you to leave. She screamed through the phone. I had been patient until now. But this time I couldn't help but cry. Amy, I'm really sorry for making you feel this way. Finally, my husband went to his parents' house and told his mother that he would cut ties with her. You want to cut ties with me? Hearing this, my mother-in-law seemed to reflect and apologized to me. Amy, I'm really sorry for everything. I didn't mean to harass you. Upon hearing this, my husband said, no, it was definitely harassment. Please don't come to our house again. His father added a firm word. Enough is enough. Since then, my mother-in-law's harassment has stopped completely. She no longer comes to our house, and the phone doesn't ring. Thanks to this, our wedding preparations proceeded smoothly. I thought I had been freed from my mother-in-law's harassment. Half a year after our registration, we welcomed the morning of our wedding in the fall. The wedding was planned with 500 guests, including company associates, friends, and relatives of both sides. I was in the bride's waiting room early in the morning, busy with makeup and hair preparations, including the ceremony, reception, and a change of dresses. 3 gowns were prepared and hung facing forward, each chosen especially for this day. In the midst of this, ignoring the staff's attempt to stop her, my mother-in-law entered the room with her 4-year-old nephew. "Good morning, Amy." My mother-in-law seemed in a good mood, smiling. "Mother, I'm sorry, but I'm in the middle of preparations, so please wait in the relatives' waiting room." I was about to change, so I told her that. "Come here, Sean." Ignoring me, my mother-in-law took her nephew's hand and stood in front of the dresses. That's when it happened. Her nephew opened the cap of the Coca-Cola he was holding. At that moment, Coca-Cola sprayed out forcefully. Eek! The venue staff screamed. In an instant, a Coca-Cola stain spread on the pristine white wedding dress. The staff in the room were frozen. Not only the hem, but the Coca-Cola had splashed up to the chest area, leaving a large stain. The staff hurriedly tried to wipe off the stain with a handkerchief. The hairdresser was stunned by the incident. The nephew seemed not to fully understand the situation but cried due to the commotion. "A child did it. The ceremony is cancelled now," my mother-in-law said, laughing. I was dumbfounded by the shock. If the stain couldn't be removed, what would I do? There was an option to wear the dress for the color change, but unfortunately, the staff tried to remove the stain, but it seemed it wouldn't come off immediately. More staff arrived, and the scene became chaotic. The dress might not return to its original state. As I looked at the dress, I suddenly realized, that's not my dress. Huh? My mother-in-law's smile faded. It turned out that it wasn't my dress. At first glance, it looked identical, but the embroidery was completely different. The venue staff hurriedly checked the dress. "We sincerely apologize. That dress isn't meant for the bride. We mistakenly got another one ready instead." "What? Then whose dress was it?" I became anxious. "We will prepare your dress immediately." The staff took the stained dress and left the room. My mother-in-law, who had been happy until now, turned pale at the fact that she had stained someone else's dress. I immediately sensed from her expression that she had intended to stain my dress, using her nephew. The way the Coca-Cola sprayed out was unusual, suggesting she might have tampered with it before entering the room. Regardless, using her nephew for such extreme harassment was unforgivable. I'll be excused for a moment. Concerned by her nephew's crying, which could be heard outside, my sister-in-law entered the room. "Mom, weren't you just supposed to check in?" Upon entering, my sister-in-law was surprised to see her Coca-Cola-covered nephew. "What happened?" She wiped his face with a handkerchief and tried to calm her inconsolable nephew. I explained what had happened. "What? He stained someone else's dress?" My sister-in-law was very surprised. Overwhelmed by anger, I blurted out my thoughts. "No, it's not your son's fault. Your mother made him do it." "What?" My sister-in-law looked at my mother-in-law. "No, that's not true. Stop making false accusations." My mother-in-law hurriedly defended herself. "He was just trying to drink the Coca-Cola when it sprayed out. It was an accident." However, my sister-in-law countered. "But Sean can't buy Coca-Cola, right? And he's still too young to have had it before. Why did you give it to him? Kids like Coca-Cola, right?" I thought he'd drink it. My mother-in-law stumbled over her words. I seized the moment. The way the Coca-Cola sprayed out was not normal. Did you tamper with it before giving it to Sean? No, that's not true. Please stop. My mother-in-law held her head as she responded. It was an accident, I say. Really? My sister-in-law pressed my mother-in-law as my nephew continued to cry. Perhaps finally realizing her defeat, my mother-in-law confessed. I tampered with the Coca-Cola and got Sean to pop it open right in front of the dress. Hearing this, my sister-in-law sighed heavily. Why would you do such a thing? She asked, holding her head. It's all this bride's fault. What? I was puzzled by her response. I've been trying to guide this bride, but she complained that it was too harsh. Because of that, Howard told me he'd cut ties with me. And even my husband started to dislike me. My mother-in-law shouted, pointing at me. I was so taken aback by her words that I retorted. Regardless of whether that was guidance, there's no excuse for ruining a dress on the day of the ceremony. Isn't this just harassment? My mother-in-law became infuriated in response. Because you made me feel terrible. Despite her history of harassing me, she seemed to justify her revenge because she felt wronged. I don't care about that. The harassment was real. And both Howard and your husband were concerned for me. Being disliked by them is a result of your own actions, isn't it? I responded calmly. I will never accept a bride of your background. She approached me, raising her voice. I don't care if you don't accept me. I had long lost any desire to get along with my mother-in-law. Everyone, please calm down. My sister-in-law intervened between us. The ceremony is soon. This isn't the time to argue. She then turned to me and apologized. I'm really sorry my mom caused trouble on the day of the ceremony. It might be difficult, but please try to calm down. Amy, you don't have to worry about anything. It seemed my sister-in-law hadn't been aware of the ongoing harassment. But she seemed to grasp the situation somewhat. As she said this while grabbing my mother-in-law's arm. Let go of me. My mother-in-law protested, but my sister-in-law ignored her. I won't allow Mom to bother you any longer, so please switch gears and prepare. She forcibly took my mother-in-law and the crying nephew out of the room. I was still quite shaken after they left. I hadn't expected such an incident on the morning of my wedding. Meanwhile, my dress was properly arranged. However, I worried about the owner of the stained dress. As I pondered, the beautician brought me a warm drink, and I tried to calm my nerves. There were company associates among the attendees, and I needed to compose myself. Somehow, I managed to refocus and headed to our wedding. Ultimately, it was a very happy ceremony. Everyone who had been part of my life celebrated with us, which was both gratifying and joyous. However, when I glanced at my husband's relatives, the atmosphere seemed somber. Perhaps news of my mother-in-law's actions had spread. Later, I learned from the venue staff that the dress ruined by the Coca-Cola was another bride's haute couture dress. Our wedding took place in the morning, but there was another ceremony in the evening at the same venue, and that was the dress intended for use. The woman supposed to wear it cried upon learning what happened. They managed to arrange another dress on the day, but not being able to wear the dress she had prepared for her once-in-a-lifetime event was irrevocable. The venue, responsible for the dress mix-up, compensated the woman. Nevertheless, my father-in-law, accompanied by my mother-in-law, apologized to the woman and paid a substantial amount in damages. Of course, money couldn't solve everything. I blamed myself, thinking none of this would have happened if I had been on better terms with my mother-in-law. When my husband learned about the incident, he apologized repeatedly for the hardship I faced. He was so infuriated that he decided to cut all ties with his mom. About 6 months after the wedding, my in-laws divorced. My father-in-law always felt uneasy about my mother-in-law. Although she appeared to be a sweet and sophisticated president's wife, she was infamous for causing trouble for anyone she didn't like when no one was watching. Due to ongoing troubles, he hired a detective to investigate her, which revealed her wrongdoings, including harassment of neighbors and shouting at store staff. He was also fed up with her slander and harassment towards me. My father-in-law had planned to divorce after Howard's wedding had settled down. Despite some residual feelings for his longtime spouse, this incident was the last straw. Initially, my mother-in-law refused to divorce, but after separation and facing my steadfast father-in-law, she eventually agreed. Losing her position as the president's wife and being disowned by her son meant she would no longer harass me. Only my sister-in-law seemed to care for the now dejected mother-in-law. But my nephew, possibly traumatized, cried every time he saw her, making it difficult for them to meet. It was all the seeds my mother-in-law had sown. I felt no sympathy for her. I am now enjoying a happy married life. I'm expected to provide $50,000 support for the wedding? That's only natural as a parent, right? At these words spoken by my son, I couldn't believe my ears. I had just provided $50,000 for the wedding expenses of my son and his soon-to-be wife. Right after that, my son, changing his demeanor completely, spoke those words to me as if it was the most natural thing. His face wore an ugly smile I had never seen before, making him look like a stranger to me. As I stood shocked and speechless, he delivered the final blow. "Mom, I have no use for you anymore. We're cutting ties." Despite having always taken care of various needs for my son and his wife, to think they would sever ties with me right after receiving a large sum of money is just heartless. Even today, I was helping them move into their new home at their request. I never imagined that the son I raised alone after losing my husband, when he was just 10, would one day cut ties with me. Then, his wife chimed in with a laugh. "Exactly. We don't need you anymore, so we're cutting ties." Echoing my son, they both burst into laughter. Overwhelmed, I stood there unable to move. "We won't even invite you to the wedding. Can you just leave already? Thanks for everything." After being told this by my son, I could only reply with a simple, "All right." And without another word, I left their new home. My mind was all over the place with sadness, frustration, and rage. Why did I have to be treated so cruelly? Did my son see me as nothing more than a cash cow? Suddenly, I remembered the days when my husband was still alive, and we were a happy family of 3. My son was such a good, honest child back then. But he started to change after his father's death. I felt increasingly dejected, but I tried to stay calm. 3 minutes later, I called the wedding venue, introducing myself as the mother of the groom. I spoke to a staff member and conveyed something. "I think the wedding will have to be cancelled. My name is Kathy. I'm a 55-year-old company employee. My husband and I met in college, and remarried a few years after starting our jobs. Both of us loved children and wanted to have them as soon as we got married. But it took a while to conceive. After some tests, it turned out that I had fertility issues. I was deeply saddened, but my husband always took great care of me. Don't be so down, Kathy. Let's just take it easy. I'm happy just being with you. My husband never blamed me, always comforting me with a smile. Eventually, after 5 years of marriage and 3 years of fertility treatments, we were overjoyed to find out I was pregnant. I was so excited to meet our long-awaited child. And I spent the pregnancy in a calm state. Time passed, and we were blessed with a healthy baby boy. We named him Ryan. My husband and I cherished Ryan, raising him with great care. My husband was a wonderful father, always eager to take Ryan to the park and look after him. I wished for us to always live happily together. However, my dream was shattered when Ryan was 10. My husband died in a car accident. Despite the sudden and devastating loss, I couldn't keep crying forever. I had to raise Ryan on my own. I encouraged myself to be strong and raised Ryan single-handedly, bustling about every day. In the beginning, Ryan helped with the housework. Mom, I'll fold the laundry. You take a break. Thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate it. I was so happy he was growing up to be a kind child. But things changed once he started middle school. He stopped helping around the house and began to speak to me rudely. Don't just serve vegetables. Put meat on the table. What are you talking about? That's not balanced. Shut up. Just do what I say. He often complained about meals, and I struggled with his behavior. He would also throw tantrums over things he didn't like. And I had many discussions with Ryan about his attitude. However, his arrogant behavior continued through his teenage rebellion years. By the time he was a university student, Ryan had calmed down, and his violent outbursts stopped. However, I was concerned about his reckless spending of his earnings from part-time jobs. Despite my frequent reminders, he would respond reluctantly. Yeah, I get it. Stop nagging. After graduating, Ryan got a job at a small company and decided to move out as he started working. I thought my child-rearing days were finally over, and I looked forward to a relaxed life on my own. Although it was a bit lonely at first, I soon enjoyed living by myself. 3 years later, Ryan brought a woman home. Mom, I'm getting married to this girl. Nice to meet you, I'm Jennifer. I was surprised by the sudden marriage announcement. But Ryan was 25 and a respectable working adult. I had no reason to oppose, and I decided to bless their union. Congratulations. Jennifer, my son might be a bit unreliable, but please take good care of him. Sure, leave him to me. Jennifer was 2 years older than Ryan, and they worked at the same place. Jennifer had lost her parents when she was young and was raised by her grandparents. I hoped they would build a happy family together. But Ryan then made a shocking request. So, Mom. Actually, we have a favor to ask. Jennifer and I don't have any savings. To save up for the wedding, we want to live with you at home. That's okay, right? What? I was taken by surprise and couldn't help but yell in a silly way. Why are you so surprised? Isn't it normal to be happy when your son and his wife want to live with you? Ryan asked, looking puzzled. Wait a minute. Living together right after getting married isn't fair to Jennifer. I can help with the wedding costs, but it would be better for you two to set up your own place. I refused their request, but Jennifer loudly protested. It's fine for me. I want to save money, so please let us live here. Kathy, please. Seeing Jennifer pleading desperately, I felt conflicted. Honestly, I had no reason to want to live with them. My body was still healthy. I could do everything on my own. And I was finally enjoying my life alone after finishing child-rearing. Also, having had many difficulties with Ryan before, I wasn't very positive about living together. Beside Jennifer, Ryan also pleaded. Mom, please. Jennifer is saying this too. Let us live with you. We'll share the housework and of course pay living expenses. Please, we want to save money. Since they were both so desperate, I gave in to the pressure and finally agreed to live together. All right. If you both say so, let's live here together as three. Thus, our life together began. However, I soon regretted agreeing so quickly to the arrangement. Kathy, I want fried chicken today. And for the soup, clam chowder soup would be great. Oh, that sounds good. Mom, please take care of it. As if it were the most natural thing in the world. My son and his wife requested the dinner menu. They did no household chores themselves and never thanked me. They took it for granted that I would prepare meals, do the laundry, and clean. Despite also working full-time like them, all responsibilities were pushed onto me. Even when I came home later than them, they never did any housework. I naturally reprimanded them, but they wouldn't listen. Even cleaning their own room was left entirely up to me. Hey, Ryan and Jennifer. At least try to keep your room clean. It gets so messy that I can't even walk around just 2 days after I clean it up. You're too strict. You're better at cleaning, so please do it. Even when I expressed my concerns, Jennifer just grinned without any remorse. And Ryan sided with her, despite their initial promise to share household duties. I sighed heavily, disappointed. However, I could still bear it as they regularly deposited their share of living expenses into our joint account. But gradually even that became reluctant. It seems you haven't put money into the joint account yet this month, have you? When I asked, Ryan sighed loudly and grumbled. Stop nagging. Just wait. Mom, when did you become so greedy about money? It's not about being greedy, it's about sticking to our agreement. Please pay your share of the living expenses properly. After all, you leave all the housework to me. While I was discussing this with Ryan, Jennifer muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "What a witch." Scary. As days like these continued, I grew increasingly fed up with my son and his wife. I tried several times to suggest ending our living arrangement, but each time, they both cried and apologized. Once, they even went so far as to kneel and beg me to continue living together, so I ended up agreeing. Years passed, and one day Ryan said, "We want to have our wedding soon, but we still haven't saved up any money. So, Mom, could you help out with the wedding expenses?" Ryan told me this with a grin, and I sighed. He hadn't been paying his living expenses properly. And now he was saying he had no savings. Wasn't the whole point of them moving in to save money? But I saw an opportunity and told Ryan, "All right. I'll provide you with $50,000 for a beautiful wedding. I'm looking forward to it." Really? Woohoo! I didn't think you'd give us $50,000. I'm so happy. Ryan seemed ready to jump for joy, and I added a condition. However, this is the end of our living together. You and Jennifer will need to move out. What? Ryan looked displeased, but quickly reconsidered and smiled broadly. Okay. If we're getting $50,000, that's totally fine. We'll start looking for a place right away. Ryan agreed surprisingly easily. I had thought he might put up more of a fight, considering how comfortable he'd been living with me. Perhaps the $50,000 was just too enticing for him. Soon after, Ryan and Jennifer began looking for a new place. I referred them to a wedding venue where a friend of mine worked, and they both liked it and booked it immediately. Months passed, and with just 1 month until the wedding, the day of their move to the new place arrived. They asked me to help with the preparations, so I assisted them in unpacking at their new apartment. The place was modest, but spacious enough for two. They weren't thinking of having children yet, but I guessed they might move somewhere larger if they did. As I immersed myself in the work, the room became decent enough for normal living. Thanks, Mom. So, when are you going to wire the $50,000? We have to pay for the venue soon. Ryan asked with eyes full of expectation. Yes, I understand. I'll make the transfer to your account via online banking right now. I took out my smartphone and proceeded to transfer the $50,000 from my late husband's inheritance to Ryan's account. The transaction is complete. I'm looking forward to the wedding. Great. Okay, I'll contact Ms. Ford, the wedding planner, today to tell her we can transfer the ceremony fees. Saying this, Ryan was texting Ms. Ford. After sending the message, he put his phone on the table. Phew, that's a relief. That was all Ryan said, without a word of thanks to me. Neither he nor Jennifer expressed any gratitude, which irked me enough to comment. Wouldn't a thank you be appropriate? Ryan responded with the crudest grin I had ever seen. $50,000 is only natural for a parent, right? What? At Ryan's remark, I couldn't believe my ears. As I stood dumbfounded, he delivered the final blow. We don't need you anymore. We're cutting ties. Then, Jennifer grinned and chimed in. That's right. We don't need you anymore, so we're cutting ties. We won't even invite you to the wedding. Can you just leave already? Thanks for everything. Today marks the end of our relationship. Laughing loudly, my son and his wife said this. I simply replied, all right, and left their new place without another word. My mind was a mess of despair, disappointment, and anger. Why did I have to be treated so poorly? Did Ryan think of me as just a money source? Suddenly, I remembered the days when my husband was still alive, and we lived happily as a family of 3. Ryan had been such a good, honest child back then. But he had changed gradually after his father's death. My husband in heaven would be saddened to see what a terrible person Ryan had become. I felt increasingly downhearted, but I tried to stay calm. 3 minutes later, I called the wedding venue, introducing myself as Ryan's mother. I spoke to Ms. Ford and conveyed something. I think the wedding will have to be cancelled. Later, Ryan called me. Without even saying hello, he started shouting. What's going on? There's no $50,000 from you. And the wedding venue called to confirm the payment for the wedding expenses. Hey, what the hell is happening? Ryan was panicking, but I explained calmly. Of course, the money hasn't been transferred. I set up the transfer to your account to happen in 3 days. What? Ryan exclaimed incredulously. To begin with, I never trusted you and Jennifer with money. Because of your reckless spending. That's why I set the transfer for 3 days later. thinking I might need to cancel it in case something happened. Right after you disowned me, I canceled the transfer. What? I thought it would be transferred immediately. Ryan sounded shaken, even over the phone. Also, I informed the wedding venue. I thought Ms. Ford would be troubled by this. Without my $50,000, you wouldn't be able to pay for the wedding, would you? Don't joke around. Is that what a parent does? Enjoy seeing your son suffer? Just transfer the $50,000 now. Ryan yelled in desperation. It's funny he still calls himself my son after disowning me. Anger rose within me, and I told him coldly. What? We've disowned each other, haven't we? I'm not your mom anymore, and I don't have a son. Ryan's demeanor changed completely as he pleaded. Don't say that. Look, when I said we were disowning, it was just in the heat of the moment. I'm sorry, so please, cheer up. If you don't transfer the $50,000, we're really in trouble. We have no money. I have no intention of giving money to strangers. Goodbye. I firmly stated and then hung up the phone, immediately setting Ryan's number to reject incoming calls. Whether they proceed with the wedding or cancel it, I no longer cared as I had written them off. A few days before the scheduled wedding date, Jennifer called. Kathy, please, we need the $50,000. I'm not your mother-in-law anymore. I responded in a cold tone, but Jennifer pleaded over my words. Please, we've decided to go through with the wedding. We couldn't afford the cancellation fees, so we thought we might as well have it. We've borrowed money from friends, but it's not nearly enough. We thought about borrowing from credit card companies, but they won't lend to us because Ryan and I have both had delayed payments. Ryan and Jennifer had repeatedly delayed their credit card payments while splurging on branded goods. It seems that the reason they had no savings while living with me was because they were spending on luxury items. I'm not familiar with brands, but their room was indeed littered with expensive bags and clothes. So, we reluctantly asked our relatives for money. But now they all suddenly demand it back. When we mentioned that we had already settled the venue costs, they said they wouldn't show up to the wedding. It's only natural to return what you've borrowed. Even a child understands that, I said, astonished. But we have no way to pay it back. We don't know how much we can collect from the wedding gifts. That's why we need your $50,000. Please give us the $50,000. I refuse. There's still a considerable amount of unpaid living expenses from when you lived with me. First, return that money. If you pay back what you owe from that time, then I'll consider listening. Jennifer was momentarily at a loss for words, but then pleaded again. I'll return it someday. We really need the $50,000, or our future is doomed. You're the only one we can rely on now. You've brought this on yourselves. I don't know about it. And since we're strangers now, don't ever contact me again. I hung up the phone. Jennifer's tone was noticeably ingratiating, indicating her desperation. However, I felt no urge to help them, and set Jennifer's number to reject calls just like Ryan's. On the day of the wedding, Miss Ford, who was overseeing Ryan and Jennifer's wedding, later told me that hardly any family members attended. Their friends became suspicious when they sensed the odd atmosphere during the ceremony. The reception, which was supposed to feature a bride's thank you letter and family performances, ended up being only speeches from friends, turning it more into a lavish drinking party than a reception. Ryan and Jennifer desperately lied to multiple friends about why their relatives were absent. It seems like everyone suddenly had urgent work. Yeah. And some fell sick too. It's really troubling for everyone. They tried to cover up with such lies, but it was clear from their demeanor and tone that they were lying. Despite this, they kept talking, unaware their lies were apparent, and eventually started cursing their relatives. Really, if they were going to skip, we should have borrowed more money from them. We messed up. This comment led their friends to realize Ryan and Jennifer had borrowed money from their relatives, which was why most were absent. Disgusted, most guests decided to leave, but upon noticing this, Ryan suddenly stood up and went somewhere. He was heading to the place where the wedding gifts were kept. Fearing that his friends might demand their gifts back, he tried to hide them elsewhere. Enraged, the friends forced him to return the gifts and then left the wedding. Only Ryan and Jennifer were left at the venue, their faces showing despair as they began to blame each other. It's all your fault. Why did you say that? Because of you, everyone left. The gifts were taken back too. What are we going to do now? Shut up. Don't just complain at me. It was a mistake to marry you in the first place. Jennifer, infuriated by Ryan's harsh words, slapped him, escalating their argument. Ms. Ford tried to calm them down, but they continued fighting. And the wedding ended in the worst possible way. I apologized to Ms. Ford for the inconvenience and sighed deeply at Ryan. A few days later, on a holiday, I was sitting on the sofa watching a movie, enjoying a relaxing day. Then I heard someone fiddling with the entrance lock, followed by the doorbell ringing insistently. I immediately knew who it was and frowned. I thought about ignoring it, but not wanting to cause a disturbance in the neighborhood, I reluctantly stood up and first checked the monitor. As expected, the people I anticipated were on the screen. As I thought, I muttered, then slowly opened the door. The person who had been fiddling with the lock shouted as soon as they saw my face. Why are you so slow to answer? And why did you change the locks, Mom? Yes, it was Ryan. I had changed the locks right after they declared our disownment. Our wedding turned out horribly because of you. Next to Ryan, Jennifer also glared at me with eyes full of hatred. What are you doing coming here all of a sudden? I have nothing to talk to you about anymore. Please go back home. As I said this wearily, Ryan blurted out something outrageous. It's because you didn't transfer the $50,000 to me that our wedding was ruined. So you need to pay us $100,000 as compensation. What? I inadvertently let out a dumbfounded exclamation. How could they blame me so brazenly after how they've treated me? Moreover, $100,000 is just unrealistic. It pains me to see how my own son has turned out like this. That's right. You're the worst, Kathy. And because of you, all the relatives skipped the wedding. It's all your fault that we suffered. Jennifer ranted, and I looked at them both with a cold gaze, realizing they only ever blame others. I decided to confront them with the truth. I received a call from the relatives saying how appalling it is that a mother would steal the $50,000 wedding fund saved up by her son. I was shocked by such an outrageous accusation. You two lied to the relatives to borrow money, didn't you? They both visibly flinched at my words. I revealed your lies by showing the relatives the bank records for the $50,000 transfer and its cancellation that I had prepared in case you turned on me. Why would you do such a thing? Ryan protested, his voice trembling. I was being made out to be the villain. It's only natural that I'd defend myself. Their lies about me had spread, and when the relatives found out, they were furious. So that's why they suddenly demanded their money back. But we already told everyone we had paid the venue with the borrowed money. And everyone got really angry. They even started saying they wouldn't attend the wedding. Jennifer explained in a meek voice, visibly pale. This is clearly all your fault, Mom. Pay us the $100,000. Ryan glared at me, yelling. I responded coldly to his unreasonable demands. What you're saying is nonsensical. Asking for $50,000 and now $100,000. All you ever do is demand money in such a vulgar manner. Also, I've put this house on the market. It's already sold, and I'll be moving out soon. So don't come here anymore. Even if you do, I won't be here. What? Why did you sell it without telling me? This is also my home. Ryan shouted, kicking a potted plant beside the door. His anger seemingly unappeasable, his eyes flashing with rage. I was momentarily intimidated by his fury but quickly reminded myself that I was not in the wrong and regained my composure. With firm resolve, I told him, the house is in my name. What I do with it is my business. At my words, Ryan fumbled for a response, then seemed to have an epiphany, and said, Hey! What about the money from the sale? It must have sold for a lot given the location. As your son, I deserve some of that money. What? We've already severed ties, so you are no longer my son. Don't make me repeat myself. And after all, you were the one who disowned me. Yet now you act all entitled. As I expressed my disgust, Ryan exploded in anger. Don't mess with me, old hag. Just give us the money. That's right. Give us the money. Faced with their escalating demands, I sighed deeply and said, Please leave now. Goodbye, and closed the door on them. They continued shouting outside the door. Believing this was becoming a neighborhood nuisance. I was about to call the police when I heard from outside. This is the police. We've received a noise complaint. Can we speak with you? It turned out the neighbors had already called the police. Ryan and Jennifer immediately quieted down and began profusely apologizing. Police? Oh, no, I'm sorry. We were just being loud. I could hear Ryan's voice apologizing in a flustered tone. What's going on here? Nothing. We were just visiting someone here. We'll be leaving now. Sorry for causing a disturbance. Jennifer desperately tried to smooth things over with the police. After receiving a warning, they left quickly. Soon after, the police rang my bell. And I explained the situation. They advised me to report any further issues. And I thanked them, hoping there would be no next time. Later, I moved and started fresh elsewhere, keeping my new address unknown to Ryan and Jennifer. Considering my future, I decided to retire early, having just had my last day at work. I was grateful to have worked there, especially since I started that job when I knew I had to raise Ryan alone after my husband passed away. I used my retirement funds and the inheritance my husband left me to move into an apartment with prioritized helper services. Considering my future living alone, I thought carefully about my old age and decided on this apartment. The layout is one room which is perfect for living alone. The area is filled with parks and green spaces, which I really like. There are also amenities like supermarkets, cafes, and bakeries nearby, making it a very livable environment. I still hear about Ryan and Jennifer from relatives occasionally. After the wedding, even their friends abandoned them. And they couldn't repay the borrowed money. Some relatives, losing patience, went to their home only to find it abandoned. The couple had fled to escape their debts. However, using a private detective, the relatives located them and, through a court order, started deducting repayments directly from their wages to escape from the debts they owed to relatives. Ryan and Jennifer quit their previous jobs and found new employment at small companies, with salaries lower than before and further deductions for debt repayments. They are reportedly living a difficult life. Their relationship seems to be deteriorating as well, with constant bickering and blame shifting between them. Given these circumstances, it's unlikely they can afford luxuries like brand name goods anymore. Ryan and Jennifer are still looking for me, surprisingly still hoping to receive money from me despite my clear stance of never intending to give them any. They are even persistently asking relatives about my whereabouts. But thankfully, everyone is sympathetic towards me, and nobody has revealed my location. I've only shared my new address with a select few relatives, so it's unlikely that they will discover where I live. I've retired and I'm really enjoying a calm life in a new area. And I have no plans to ever reach out to Ryan and Jennifer again. I have completely written them off. As long as I live modestly, my current finances are sufficient. But I'm considering working at a nearby supermarket to save a bit more money. Despite everything that has happened, I'm now living a very happy life.